Yang Kai was on his last legs, so he wouldn't dare to be negligent when he was facing a territory lord. Although He Yuan didn't intend to kill him as he wanted to capture him alive, Yang Kai certainly wouldn't grant his wish. If he was really captured by He Yuan and sent to the royal city, he would become a servant for the Black Ink clan for the rest of his life. Before He Yuan could get close to him, Yang Kai drew on whatever power was left in his small universe. Strike first to gain the advantage. As the golden crow cawed, a great sun leapt from behind him, burning with a brilliant radiance. At the same time, a full moon rose as well, casting its frigid cold glow. As the sun and moon appeared simultaneously, space principles madly fluctuated. The sun and moon started spinning around in tandem, transforming into a kaleidoscope where space principles and time principles intertwined and formed into space-time strength before spiraling towards He Yuan. Sun and moon divine wheel. Faced with a formidable enemy like He Yuan, Yang Kai wouldn't dare to hold back any of his strength and directly used his most powerful method. He Yuan stopped in his tracks and instinctively felt a horrifying power coming from this secret technique. This caused his expression to turn solemn. Covered in the mysterious force, he even felt that his mind and body had been affected. Thick black ink strength erupted from his body and formed into a shield around him. Right after he did that, he was stunned to realize that the secret technique, which had looked far away just now, was already about to strike him. A violent force swept across the void and caused the local space to tremble. He Yuan was forced backwards several steps while the Black Ink clansmen who were surrounding Yang Kai were instantly vaporized despite only being hit by the attack's fallout. A moment later, the terrifying force settled. He Yuan stood there stiffly, a strange and mysterious force wandering around his figure like arcs of lightning. The surviving Black Ink clansmen stared at He Yuan in shock, as they were worried he had been killed just like that. After all, they had witnessed how terrifying Yang Kai's secret technique was. They had no idea what would happen to their territory lord after being struck head-on by such an attack. Fortunately for them, even though He Yuan seemed affected by the secret technique, he wasn't at risk of losing his life. Just a moment later, his figure shook and the lingering arcs of lightning around him were shattered. After he sprayed out a mouthful of black blood, his aura weakened slightly. He then turned to look in a different direction and gritted his teeth. The next instant, he transformed into a dark light and shot forward. It wasn't until this moment that the surviving Black Ink clansman realized that Yang Kai was gone. Apparently, Yang Kai ran away right after he cast his secret technique. However, they were not powerful enough to resist the influence of the secret technique on their senses, so they were not aware that Yang Kai had fled. Just then, Yang Kai reappeared from the void. He staggered and almost couldn't support his own weight, his face as pale as a sheet of paper. There was no doubt that the heritage of his small universe was indeed far richer than those of the other Seventh Order Open Heaven Realm Masters. However, since he started fleeing from the sealed world near the royal city, he had been constantly manipulating space principles and pushing himself to his limits. It also took him quite a bit of effort to kill Lu Ziyan and Gue Liao earlier. Furthermore, he almost used up all his energy to cast his most powerful secret technique at He Yuan. Fortunately, he had the World Tree clone with him. Otherwise, his small universe would have been affected given the state he was in. That would have been a huge problem. Yang Kai wouldn't dare to remain and quickly fished out a handful of Open Heaven pills from his space ring and stuffed them into his mouth. Although Open Heaven pills couldn't help restore his power quickly, it was better than nothing. Moreover, the living creatures in his small universe would continuously produce world force for him, which helped restore his strength over time. The moment he took a step forward, though, Yang Kai realized that an aura had locked onto him from afar. There was no doubt that it was He Yuan. As a Black Ink territory lord, he could easily ascertain Yang Kai's whereabouts as long as the latter wasn't too far away. Yang Kai cursed. He didn't expect his sun and moon divine will to kill He Yuan. After all, there was a huge gap between their powers as He Yuan was in a higher relative realm. Despite that, he still hoped that the sun and moon divine will could wound He Yuan and tie him down for a moment. As long as he could escape He Yuan's perception range, he could shake him off and gain some safety. However, Yang Kai hadn't expected that He Yuan would recover so quickly. Now that he had been targeted by He Yuan's aura, it wouldn't be easy to get rid of him, unless Yang Kai could continuously use instantaneous movement to open a large gap between them. Nevertheless, Yang Kai was unable to do so at this moment. He couldn't even activate instantaneous movement once, let alone repeatedly. Left with no choice, he could only try to restore his energy while doing his best to flee. An enraged He Yuan moved across the void swiftly, shortening the distance between them. To add insult to injury, Yang Kai would come across some black ink clansmen who got in his way from time to time. There was no doubt that they were all residents of He Yuan's territory. Upon receiving He Yuan's order, they started forming into different teams to cover a wide range. There were only a small number of people in every team, ranging from 10 to 30, their leader usually a single feudal lord. Although these black ink clansmen couldn't harm Yang Kai, they could slow him down. Yang Kai either had to avoid clashing with them or force his way through them. Regardless of what option he took, he would have to consume both strength and time. Barely 1 hour later, Yang Kai broke through his third blockade. However, He Yuan was also getting closer to him. Seeing that it would reach a critical point where He Yuan would be able to make a move against him, Yang Kai hesitated no more and pushed his space principles. By using instantaneous movement, he disappeared from the spot in an instant. He used up what little energy he had recovered with that one move. Over the next day or so, such incidents would happen roughly every hour. The gap between Yang Kai and He Yuan would shorten and widen in a seemingly endless cycle. Yang Kai felt extremely bitter as he was unable to get rid of He Yuan, who was just like maggots on rotting bones. On several occasions, he almost couldn't widen the gap between them at the most critical moments, allowing He Yuan's attacks to graze him from afar, which exacerbated the horrible situation he was already in. By straining himself for a long period of time, Yang Kai realized that his vision had turned blurry. The pounding of his heart against his chest could clearly be heard, as though it couldn't endure the immense strain and would explode at any moment. While he was trying his hardest to escape, He Yuan wasn't exactly feeling any better. Pursuing such a fast and tricky enemy had left him exhausted as well. However, in order to make up for his mistake, he would never let Yang Kai go. Only by capturing Yang Kai and bringing him to the royal city would he be able to appease the royal lord. Otherwise, he would be doomed. The warship plan was critical to the future of the entire Black Ink clan, yet it was ruined because of his negligence. It was expected that the royal lord wouldn't easily let him off. Initially, Yang Kai thought that things would get better after he left He Yuan's territory. After all the Black Ink clansmen he came across all along were He Yuan's subordinates. However, he realized he was mistaken upon fleeing from He Yuan's domain. Instead of getting better, things actually got worse. The Black Ink clansmen he bumped into in He Yuan's territory only came in small teams. Therefore, he was able to force his way out despite being besieged. However, right after he left He Yuan's territory, Yang Kai came across an entire Black Ink clan army. It was an army consisting of several tens of thousands of troops. Among all those Black Ink clansmen, Yang Kai clearly detected a powerful aura coming from another territory lord. Moreover, the direction they were traveling suggested that they were heading towards Inyang Pass. If Yang Kai rashly charged forward, he wouldn't stand a chance to escape. The territory lord in charge of the army just had to cooperate with He Yuan, who was chasing him from behind, and they would easily capture him. Soon, Yang Kai came to realize something. The Black Ink army wasn't there to intercept him. Instead, they were heading to the main battlefield. In order to facilitate the old ancestors' plan and save Yang Kai, the humans had emptied out Inyang Pass. Certainly, the Black Ink clan had to meet the humans in battle. The territory lords and feudal lords called the roll in the shortest time possible and set out towards Inyang Pass from all different directions. The army before Yang Kai's eyes was just one of many. At that instant, Yang Kai fell into a dilemma. If he continued heading in Inyang Pass direction, he would only come across even more Black Ink clan armies. Even if he was in peak condition, he still could never hope to break through all of their blockades, unless the masters from Inyang Pass could work with him to open a safe passageway. However, Yang Kai was in a terrible state, and he hadn't managed to restore a lot of his strength, so this idea was not feasible. Once he blindly used instantaneous movement, he might land right in the middle of a large Black Ink clan army. When that happened, it would be akin to stepping right into the enemy's trap. It was impossible for him to avoid running into these Black Ink clan armies and return to Inyang Pass. Worse, every enemy army had a territory lord overseeing it, as they were practically the territory lord's own subordinates. He Yuan alone was able to leave Yang Kai battered and exhausted. If he had to contend with other territory lords as well, he would fall into an even more horrible state. Nonetheless, where could he go if he couldn't return to Inyang Pass? While he was hesitating, the territory lord from the army up ahead scanned his surroundings with his divine sense and seemed to detect Yang Kai's presence. After gritting his teeth, Yang Kai turned around and transformed into a ray of light. Soon, the territory lord's divine sense detected a trace of aura left behind by Yang Kai. After giving it a thought, he soon figured out what was happening. However, he was tasked with dealing with the human's army, so he wouldn't dare to be distracted. A moment later, he decided to ignore it and retracted his divine sense. The moment Yang Kai turned in a different direction, He Yuan followed, a hint of surprise flashing across his face. He was surprised to realize that Yang Kai didn't head straight towards Inyang Pass, but after pondering on it for a moment, he soon figured out what Yang Kai was worried about. He snorted and thought, "Where else can you go if you can't go back to Inyang Pass?" He Yuan had somewhat figured out the condition that Yang Kai was in, so he firmly believed that as long as he persevered, he would capture Yang Kai sooner or later. Now, he just had to wait for Yang Kai to lose all of his strength. While he was in his thoughts, though, he suddenly lost track of Yang Kai. The realization astounded him. Mid-pursuit, He Yuan suddenly stopped in his tracks and spread out his powerful divine sense to scan the surroundings. However, regardless of how hard he tried, he couldn't find Yang Kai's whereabouts. This caused his expression to darken. "I can't believe I lost him. How is that even possible?" Yang Kai was on his last legs with little energy left. How did he escape He Yuan's range of perception in such a state? He Yuan didn't think Yang Kai was powerful enough to cut off the thread of aura he had locked onto him, as there was a huge gap between their powers. If Yang Kai was capable of doing that, he would have done it earlier instead of waiting until now. Moreover, He Yuan didn't feel that his aura was forcefully cut off. Rather, it felt like Yang Kai just vanished somehow. The only logical explanation was that Yang Kai had massively widened the gap between them in an instant. As a result, He Yuan's aura wasn't able to locate him. However, Yang Kai didn't have much strength left. Even though he could use a special technique that would help him move across several tens of thousands of kilometers in an instant, he couldn't possibly have done such a thing repeatedly in his current state. How could he have regained so much energy in such a short period of time? With a gloomy expression, He Yuan stood still in the same spot, not knowing what to do. The void was expansive, so now that he had lost track of Yang Kai, how was he supposed to look for him? But soon, he pulled himself together. The Black Ink clan's armies were heading in Inyang Pass direction, so Yang Kai couldn't possibly go that way. That was the reason he turned around and continued fleeing. In other words, regardless of where he was still within the Black Ink clan's territory. As long as Yang Kai was still in their territory, his whereabouts would be exposed sooner or later. At the thought of this, He Yuan started taking action by heading to the fief of a feudal lord nearest to this place. The feudal lord of the fief had led his tenants towards the battlefield, so although there were still a lot of Black Ink clansmen who stayed behind, none of them was particularly powerful. Since He Yuan had shown up, these weak Black Ink clansmen would naturally obey his orders without question. Soon, with the Black Ink nest in this place as the center, word was spread across all of Muguang Royal Lord's domain. Within moments, Black Ink clansmen from all over could be seen searching for Yang Kai. Meanwhile, Yang Kai was hiding in a Black Ink cloud and recuperating. Just like He Yuan had speculated, Yang Kai had relied on instantaneous movements to shake off his tracking aura. The reason he had enough energy to use instantaneous movement repeatedly was that he had consumed a low-rank world fruit. When he left the Grand Ancient Ruins boundary back then, Yang Kai brought 16 world fruits with him. The 3 mid-rank world fruits had been put to good use, while the remaining 13 low-rank world fruits were somewhat useless. He had given one low-rank world fruit to Guiziyen, which allowed him to ascend from the second order to the third order open heaven realm. As for the remaining low-rank world fruits, he basically had no use for them. Although they came from the world tree, they were not valuable to him at all. Most had stayed in his small universe for such a long time that Xianxia had almost forgotten about them. It wasn't until his small universe was thoroughly exhausted this time that he recalled them. Although they were not valuable, they were the best spirit fruits to replenish one's world force. After consuming a low-rank world fruit, Xianxia regained enough strength in his small universe in a short time to use instantaneous movement several times in a row. It was thanks to the low-rank world fruit that he shook off He Yuan and hid inside this black ink cloud. Even though he was safe for the time being, he knew that he would not be safe for long as he was still deep inside the Black Ink clan's territory. There was no way He Yuan would let him off. At least he finally had a chance to take a breather. It felt terrible to have so little energy left in his small universe. If he had enough energy, he could fight or flee despite being no match for his opponents. Upon making sure that He Yuan hadn't found him, Xianxia quickly tried to restore his energy. He didn't consume another low-rank world fruit. With this experience, he naturally wouldn't waste something that could quickly restore a large amount of his strength. Instead, he stuffed a lot of open heaven pills into his mouth before fishing out a set of 7th order materials to refine in order to replenish his spent world force. Unfortunately, this moment of rest didn't last long. Barely half a day later, Xianxia felt several auras barge into the black ink cloud he was hiding in. Those auras were not powerful, only high-rank black ink clansmen. With a frown, Xianxia tried his best to conceal his aura. There were countless black ink clouds of different sizes in the Black Ink clan's territory, and usually, the Black Ink clan wouldn't pay them any mind. However, the fact that these high-rank Black Ink clansmen carefully searched this Black Ink cloud showed that they were looking for Xianxia. Initially, Xianxia hoped that they would be negligent so that he could continue recuperating. Unfortunately, one of the high-rank Black Ink clansmen directly flew towards his hiding place. A moment later, the high-rank Black Ink clan stood right in front of him. Lifting his gaze, he saw a vague figure hiding somewhere inside the Black Ink cloud, but before he could get a closer look, he saw a fist flying out and striking him. As the violent force exploded, the high-rank Black Ink clansman turned into a blood mist without even a chance to scream. "Over there!" one of the Black Ink clansmen exclaimed upon detecting the movement. As soon as he finished speaking, he was struck by an immense force and sent to the afterlife. 2 breaths of time later, Xianxia dashed out of the Black Ink cloud. The high-rank Black Ink clansmen who had barged into the Black Ink cloud had all lost their lives. "That human is here. We found him. Quickly inform Sir He Yuan." The moment the surrounding Black Ink clansmen saw Xianxia, they became startled for a moment before coming to their senses and shouting. Xianxia looked around and realized that the Black Ink clansmen were scattered everywhere. They were thoroughly searching through the void in order to ascertain his whereabouts. Although they were weak, there were too many of them to avoid. He Yuan didn't think these weaklings could harm Xianxia. He just wanted to make sure that Xianxia had nowhere to hide. Amidst the chaos, the Black Ink clansman closest to Xianxia cast a secret technique at him. Xianxia secretly cursed. Although he knew that He Yuan wouldn't let him off, he hadn't expected the other party to move so swiftly. Judging from the way these Black Ink clansmen searched for him, it seemed that he would have nowhere to hide no matter where he went. After dodging the attack, Xianxia summoned his Azure Dragon Spear and displayed his supreme limitless spear art to the enemy. Despite being besieged by so many Black Ink clansmen, he managed to force his way out. Those Black Ink clansmen hadn't expected Xianxia to be so ferocious, but after suffering a setback, they had learned their lesson. Wherever Xianxia went, they would keep their distance and not directly engage him. Xianxia continued charging forward until there were no longer a lot of Black Ink clansmen around him. It was then he manipulated space principles and left this area using instantaneous movement. A moment later, He Yuan arrived, but after asking around, he could only snarl through clenched teeth. "Keep searching for him. When you find him, do your best to delay him. Anyone who dares not to fight will die by my hand." Upon receiving the order, these Black Ink clansmen wouldn't dare to disobey He Yuan despite feeling bitter. Soon, Yang Kai realized that he was like a rat that these Black Ink clansmen were determined to corner. Wherever he went, the Black Ink clansmen would soon find him. Furthermore, he realized that the way these Black Ink clansmen dealt with him had changed. Initially, he just had to kill a few of them and the rest would flee, allowing him to escape with little effort. Now, however, these Black Ink clansmen refused to back down regardless of how ferocious he was. It was as though they were determined to drag him down even if they had to die. However, without a territory lord around, how were they supposed to stop Yang Kai from escaping? Their reckless charge only caused even more casualties. Presently, Yang Kai was glad that the Inyang Pass armies had tied down the main Black Ink clan force. Otherwise, he couldn't have kept moving around the Black Ink clan's territory. At the very least, the only territory lord he had to deal with so far was He Yuan. Mu Guang Royal Lord was locked in battle with the old ancestor from Inyang Pass, while most of the territory lords had probably left this place to intercept the humans from Inyang Pass. Perhaps there were still some territory lords who stayed back in Mu Guang's territory, but there wouldn't be a lot of them. Yang Kai reckoned that he would be fine as long as he was cautious enough. The only problem he had to face was how he could get rid of He Yuan and circumvent the Black Ink clan's army to rejoin the people from Inyang Pass. That was indeed a difficult task. With that said, he was already in a better situation than before. At the very least, he had restored some of his strength, so unlike some time ago he was no longer running on empty. Most of the territory lords must have headed to the battlefield, so there wouldn't be a lot of them who stayed back. At the thought of this, Yang Kai racked his brain and came up with a bold plan. The more he thought about it, the more he was inclined to believe that this plan was feasible. If this plan was successfully carried out, it would deal a heavy blow to the Black Ink clan. He became excited in an instant. He Yuan would never have thought that Yang Kai would be so reckless. Since he had made a decision, Yang Kai did not hesitate to carry out his plan. After killing for a bit, he stopped dealing with the Black Ink clansmen around him and manipulated space principles to flee. He Yuan had been in a terrible mood recently, but despite feeling vexed, he had no way to vent his anger. Just like he had expected, Yang Kai didn't have a chance to leave the Black Ink clan's domain after escaping from him and was instead now wandering around the Black Ink clan's territory. With the help of the Black Ink nests, He Yuan could easily get feedback from different places and accurately locate Yang Kai. However, this method couldn't help him capture Yang Kai. Every time he received the news and rushed to the place where Yang Kai appeared, he would only find the corpses of Black Ink clansmen while Yang Kai was nowhere to be seen. Although he was stronger than Yang Kai, he didn't have a chance to make a move against him, leaving him feeling frustrated and helpless. In his fury, He Yuan even killed 100 or so Black Ink clansmen who had retreated in fear when they confronted Yang Kai. Based on what He Yuan learned from the surviving Black Ink clansmen who had fought with Yang Kai, he confirmed that this annoying human was recovering. Yang Kai seemed to be doing his best to restore his energy, and after such a long period of time, he should have almost fully recovered by now. Nevertheless, He Yuan didn't understand what Yang Kai was up to. Since Yang Kai had almost restored all of his strength, he should be trying to leave the Black Ink clan's territory. However, from the looks of it, he didn't seem to have any intention of doing so. Instead, he seemed to be enjoying the game of hide-and-seek with the Black Ink clansmen. During this period of time, several thousand Black Ink clansmen were killed by his spear, and although only several of them were feudal lords, as most were high-rank and low-rank Black Ink clansmen, it was still humiliating for He Yuan. He Yuan was moving across the void at the speed of lightning as he headed straight to a particular battlefield. When he finally arrived at his destination, what came into his sight were corpses and broken limbs scattered all around. They were the Black Ink clansmen who were killed. Many of the horribly injured Black Ink clansmen groaned in pain. The battlefield was like a living hell. After sweeping a glance over the place, He Yuan estimated that more than 100 Black Ink clansmen were dead. He sported a grim expression. Since he started chasing after Yang Kai, he had encountered the same sight many times. Whenever he received the news and rushed over, he would see the same sight. On the other hand, Yang Kai would always run away before he arrived, leaving no chance for him to act. He had never come across a human who was as skilled as Yang Kai when it came to fleeing. Despite his burning fury, he had no way to vent it out. The surviving Black Ink clansman wouldn't dare to go near He Yuan upon his arrival. Recently, He Yuan had killed many of their companions. If He Yuan blamed them for not doing their best and decided to kill them, they would be wronged. In fact, they had tried their hardest to stop Yang Kai earlier. However, how were they supposed to make him stay behind when they were no match for him? They could only watch as Yang Kai went on a killing spree and then left. Since no Black Ink clansman took the initiative to tell him what happened, He Yuan asked grimly, "Where did he go?" A high-rank Black Ink clansman closest to him pointed in a particular direction with caution. He Yuan turned to look in that direction and frowned. That was because his territory was in that direction. Although a large area of the void could be considered his territory, his foundation was where his Black Ink nest was located. That was his direct territory. Upon that realization, He Yuan felt his chest tightening. As he recalled the route Yang Kai had been moving around, he suddenly had a bad premonition. It seemed that Yang Kai wasn't aimlessly wandering around anymore. He was heading towards a particular goal. Just then, a feudal lord rushed over from afar. Upon reaching He Yuan, he said anxiously, "Sir Territory Lord, something terrible has happened. What makes you so nervous?" He Yuan turned to look at him, the ominous feeling in his chest strengthening. This couldn't be helped, as this feudal lord was in charge of the fief that was closest to his Black Ink nest. This feudal lord was also responsible for monitoring the perimeter. He must have received some shocking news, so he rushed over and informed He Yuan about it. As expected, the feudal lord replied, "We've received word that Yang Kai is invading your territory, sir." He Yuan's head started buzzing as though it had been struck by a hammer. While feeling dizzy, he also instantly figured out Yang Kai's plan and roared, "How dare he!" He had never expected that Yang Kai, who was all on his own, didn't have the intention of fleeing at all. Instead, he wanted to raise hell when most of the Black Ink clan had left for war. It had to be said that Yang Kai was truly audacious, and his move caught He Yuan off guard. Many of the territory lords who worked for Muguang had left their domains to deal with the human army from Inyang Pass. Therefore, there was a serious lack of soldiers in their home territories right now. That was also the reason He Yuan was unable to capture Yang Kai after such a long time. Now, Yang Kai was heading straight to his territory. Although there were a lot of feudal lords left behind, He Yuan wasn't confident that they could repel Yang Kai. After all, he had witnessed the latter's capabilities during this pursuit. On the other hand, it was apparent that Yang Kai was aiming for his Black Ink nest. The foundation of a feudal lord or territory lord's territory was their Black Ink nest. Without a Black Ink nest, they couldn't be considered a real feudal lord or territory lord. This was what Jiagu taught Yang Kai back then. A massive amount of resources had to be consumed to grow a Black Ink nest. For a feudal lord's Black Ink nest to hatch and fully mature, it required a colossal amount of resources, not to mention a territory lord's Black Ink nest. In comparison, the resources needed to grow a territory lord's Black Ink nest were many times more than what would be required to nurture a feudal lord's Black Ink nest. If his Black Ink nest was destroyed, He Yuan's foundation would be gone for good. That would be an unbearable blow to him. Although he could still get a new subnest from the royal lord and hatch it, it would be a heavy burden on the royal lord's Black Ink nest. Furthermore, it would also cost the royal lord a lot of time and energy to do this. Also, after such a catastrophic failure, it wasn't even certain whether the royal lord would still give him a new subnest. Throughout the war against the humans, it wasn't rare for feudal lord Black Ink nests to be destroyed. However, only a tiny number of Black Ink nests belonging to territory lords were ever destroyed. It was a great humiliation to the Black Ink clan for a territory lord Black Ink nest to be destroyed, and the only way to wash this shame away was by killing many more humans. With a great roar, He Yuan flew straight towards his home territory. At the same time, he prayed that the feudal lords who stayed behind could stop Yang Kai. He also hoped that Yang Kai didn't really intend to destroy his Black Ink nest. However, it was apparent what Yang Kai's plan was by him heading straight to his territory. It was likely that he had his eyes on the Black Ink nest. After all, he had pretended to be a Black Ink disciple and lived in this place for years, so he might have heard of the Black Ink nest's secrets from somewhere. While feeling worried, He Yuan was moving forward at full speed. Given that he was a territory lord, it would usually take him half a day to return to his territory from the previous location, but in his haste, he managed to arrive in just 4 hours. When he finally arrived at the universe fragment where his direct territory was located, what came into his sight made him feel cold all over. That was because the universe fragment had been shattered and traces of the battle could be seen everywhere. The originally flourishing city was nothing but a disaster zone now. Every part of the place had been turned into ruins, and innumerable Black Ink clansmen had lost their lives. All of that was inconsequential though compared to what happened to the Black Ink nest, which was originally in the center of the city. The Black Ink nest, which had always looked like a giant flower bud, was starting to wither. Black Ink strength was leaking out of the Black Ink nest like fresh blood, and its roots had clearly been cut off by a violent force. What He Yuan dreaded had become a reality, and he could not accept it. The Black Ink nest was withering, and it couldn't be saved. In other words, his foundation had been destroyed. In order to rebuild his foundation, he would need a new Black Ink nest. Even if the royal lord was magnanimous enough to give him another subnest from her Black Ink nest, it would take He Yuan at least 100 years to nurture it and cost him an enormous amount of money and manpower. To make matters worse, the feudal lords working for him would all experience the same problem. In other words, he and his subordinates had to rebuild everything from scratch, which would take a very long time. Sir, a blood-soaked feudal lord detected He Yuan's aura, so he quickly shot into the sky. Where is Yang Kai? He Yuan growled through clenched teeth. He couldn't detect Yang Kai's aura, so he could only hope that the feudal lords had killed him. With that said, he knew that it was unlikely to be the case. We did not see that human named Yang Kai, the feudal lord replied. He Yuan snapped. You didn't see him? Then what happened to my territory? What happened to the Black Ink nest? Did you all destroy it? The feudal lord shuddered and quickly replied. Sir He Yuan, we really didn't see Yang Kai. Everything was destroyed by a grand dragon. He then hurriedly gave an account of what had happened. According to this feudal lord, a grand dragon which was far more than 20,000 meters long had appeared out of nowhere. It was overbearing, and its entire figure radiated a golden glow. As soon as the grand dragon appeared, a lot of Black Ink clansmen were killed by its opening dragon breath. Strangely, the grand dragon was holding a huge spear in its claws. With this weapon, it smashed the universe fragment to pieces and destroyed the Black Ink nest, leaving the entire city in ruins. What was even more outrageous to the Black Ink clansmen was that the Grand Dragon had even robbed their shops and snatched up their resources. Although the feudal lords tried their best to resist, they couldn't possibly defeat the Grand Dragon. After kicking up a storm, the Grand Dragon nonchalantly departed, leaving this mess behind. The Black Ink clansmen knew nothing about Grand Dragons as they had never seen such creatures before. Fortunately for them, the Black Ink disciples had some ideas. Grand Dragon? How could there be a Grand Dragon here? He Yuan appeared puzzled. The feudal lord replied cautiously, according to the Black Ink disciples, Yang Kai is probably not a human, but rather a member of the Dragon Clan. That Grand Dragon was his true form. He Yuan roared, I don't care whether he's a human or a member of the Dragon Clan. Find him. I must rip him to pieces. Only by doing so could he vent his fury. He was so enraged that he had even forgotten about the royal lord's order, which stated that Yang Kai had to be captured alive. But sir, the feudal lord spoke in a shaking voice, since the Black Ink nest is destroyed, we can't send any messages. He Yuan grabbed him by the collar and yanked him towards himself, his eyes practically spitting fire as he snarled. Since the Black Ink nest is gone, go out and inform everyone yourself. Mobilize all the clansmen in the territory. Leave him nowhere to hide. If you can't do that, all of you must die. Yes, the feudal lord replied anxiously. After the feudal lord flew off, He Yuan turned to look in a different direction. There seemed to be a mysterious force that was dissipating in the void. The energy fluctuations were consistent with what Yang Kai would leave behind each time he used instantaneous movement. Therefore, He Yuan speculated that Yang Kai had fled in that direction. Previously, He already didn't have a way to capture Yang Kai, and now that his black ink nest was gone, he knew it would be even harder to locate him. Nevertheless, he had to get his revenge after his foundation was destroyed. Despite his slim chances, he had to hunt Yang Kai down. Regardless of the cost, he had to capture that damn human and bring him to the royal lord to make up for his mistakes. At this moment, in a place that was far away from the universe fragment, Yang Kai was hiding inside a black ink cloud and recuperating. After assuming his grand dragon form and making a scene in He Yuan's territory, not only did he shatter the universe fragment, but he also destroyed He Yuan's black ink nest. It was expected that he would be pleased with himself. However, he had paid a hefty price to achieve this victory. There were indeed a lot of feudal lords who had stayed behind, and there were also innumerable high-rank and low-rank black ink clansmen around. Although he could easily kill more people when he was in his grand dragon form, it also made him a huge target. While Yang Kai destroyed the black ink nest, he also inevitably got struck by the black ink clansmen's attacks. To the black ink clansmen, he had made a scene and left the place in a nonchalant manner. However, only Yang Kai knew that he wasn't as nonchalant as he appeared to be when he left. In truth, he just didn't dare to remain. Otherwise, he would most likely be captured. Presently, his entire figure was covered in wounds. Every time he moved, he would grimace in pain. 3 wounds on his back were so deep that one could even see his bones. Fortunately, these injuries didn't injure his foundation, and given his intrepid physique and astonishing restorative powers, he would recover in no time. Yang Kai's trip of turning into a grand dragon and making a fuss in He Yuan's territory was rewarding. Not only had he killed a lot of black ink clansmen, but he had also destroyed He Yuan's black ink nest and snatched a massive amount of cultivation resources. The price he paid was worth it. When Yang Kai pretended to be a black ink disciple back then, he already realized that the city where He Yuan's black ink nest was located was flourishing. There were ample supplies, which included all sorts of materials of different orders. The Black Ink clan couldn't directly use these resources, so they were basically thrown into the black ink nests to help produce black ink strength. Nevertheless, these were precious cultivation resources for the humans. Since Yang Kai decided to make a move, he certainly had to take those resources away. Furthermore, there was one discovery that surprised him. He realized that his grand dragon form had lengthened. When he was in the Divine Spirit's ancestral land in the Shattered Heaven back then, he made use of the Dragon Palace and ancestral strength to become a Grand Dragon. At that time, his Grand Dragon form was 10,000 meters long. Then, with the help of Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan in the Chaotic Dead territory, his dragon vein was significantly enhanced, which allowed him to turn into a 20,000-meter Grand Dragon. At that time, Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan respectively left a mysterious power in his body that could stimulate the power of his dragon vein. Even after Yang Kai reached 20,000 meters in his Grand Dragon form, he had a feeling that the mysterious power hadn't been used up and most of it still remained hidden in his dragon bead. Then he got into a fight with Zhu Feng. At the critical moment, he spat out his dragon bead and dealt a lethal blow to Zhu Feng, which caused his dragon bead to be damaged. Over the years, the damaged dragon bead had slowly healed with the nourishing of his dragon vein. Now, it seemed his dragon vein had also been strengthened. When he transformed into a grand dragon in He Yuan's territory, he was nearly 30,000 meters long. Apparently, the damage to his dragon bead had stimulated the mysterious power left behind in his body by Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan. During this period of time, not only had his dragon bead gradually healed, but his dragon vein had also been strengthened. This came as a pleasant surprise. The strength of a grand dragon was manifested in their length. Usually, only a 10,000-meter dragon could be regarded as a grand dragon, which was equivalent to a 7th-order open heaven realm master. Now that Yang Kai's dragon form was 30,000 meters long, his power was equivalent to that of a peak 7th-order master. However, there were pros and cons to fighting as a grand dragon. Since his grand dragon form was so massive, he could cause serious damage over a wide area, especially when doing things like destroying He Yuan's territory and the black ink nest some time ago. There was no doubt that it was easier for him to achieve his goal by turning into a grand dragon. Nevertheless, his large size also meant that he wasn't as agile or maneuverable. He might suffer a setback if he faced certain opponents in such a state. Fortunately, there were no powerful beings in He Yuan's territory at that time. Although the feudal lords had gone all out, they couldn't really kill him, only inflict some injuries on him at most. Presently, Yang Kai was recuperating in a black ink cloud with peace of mind. However, he knew that he couldn't stay here for long. According to past experiences, these omnipresent black ink clansmen would soon find him, and more black ink clansmen would quickly arrive to hunt him down. As expected, barely 1 hour later, some black ink clansmen barged into the black ink cloud and found his whereabouts. Yang Kai charged forward and easily killed these black ink clansmen, and soon he arrived at a different place and snuck into a new black ink cloud. When the nearby black ink clansmen rushed over upon receiving the news, Yang Kai was already nowhere in sight. Over the following days, Yang Kai kept changing his locations as he seized every chance to recuperate. Soon though, he realized something was off. The black ink clansmen were reacting much slower than before. Previously, regardless of where he went, as long as his whereabouts were exposed, a large number of black ink clansmen would promptly swarm in from all directions and besiege him. Now, it seemed that they couldn't mobilize as quickly. This was a situation he had already expected though. Yang Kai had learned some secrets behind the black ink nests. With He Yuan's black ink nest as the center, all the feudal lord black ink nests formed a huge information network, which was used to spread information quickly. Now that he had destroyed He Yuan's black ink nest though, the central node was gone for good, disabling the information network between the black ink clansmen. That was the reason he decided to head straight to He Yuan's direct territory. Only by disabling their information network would he be able to move around easily. Now, it seemed that he had made a wise decision. Although he was still on his own, Yang Kai had already greatly improved his situation. Nevertheless, destroying He Yuan's black ink nest was just the first step of his plan. Since the black ink nests were the foundation of the black ink clan, he naturally wouldn't want to leave so soon as this chance was rare. Even though the territory lord's black ink nest was gone, there were still a lot of feudal lord black ink nests remaining. For every black ink nest that was destroyed, it would cause a huge loss to the black ink clan. It only took Yang Kai a few days to fully recover, and after fishing out a universe chart to ascertain his own location, he looked for the nearest feudal lord's fief. Soon he found a target. However, the situation he came upon surprised him a bit. After killing some black ink clansmen who were searching for him along the way, he soon reached his destination, but the huge black ink nest was already withered and collapsed on the ground, as though it was dying. Countless black ink clansmen knelt around the black ink nest with solemn expressions. It seemed that they were holding a kind of sacred ceremony. The feudal lord at the front crossed his arms and chanted something. However, regardless of how hard they tried, they couldn't save the black ink nest from dying. Its black ink strength was leaking out like fresh blood, and for every bit of black ink strength that was lost, the aura of the black ink nest would weaken a little. It seemed that this black ink nest would wither and die within half a day. Yang Kai flew forward as though no one else was around while the black ink clansmen, who were completely focused on the ceremony, didn't detect his presence. Standing in front of the black ink nest, Yang Kai swept his gaze around and frowned, a perplexed expression on his face. The feudal lord at the front finally detected Yang Kai's aura and turned his head. When he made out Yang Kai's face, he snapped, "It's you!" It wasn't until this moment that these black ink clansmen came to their senses and stood up. In the blink of an eye, Yang Kai was surrounded by all these black ink clansmen. Yang Kai turned to look at the feudal lord and nodded gently. "Brother Xiagu." The feudal lord was none other than Xiagu, who was the owner of this fief. Yang Kai had been here once and witnessed everything when Xiagu planted the black ink nest and hatched it. It was also through Xiagu that he learned a lot of the secrets about black ink nests that the humans were previously unaware of. The way Yang Kai addressed Xiagu startled him. With a doubtful look, he glanced at Yang Kai and asked, "You, is the rumor about you real? Have you betrayed Sir Territory Lord?" Yang Kai replied impassively, "I'm a human, and I've never pledged to be loyal to him. How could you say that I've betrayed him? As for the rumor, I have no idea what you've heard, but it's most likely to be true." Xiagu snapped, Did you destroy Sir Territory Lord's black ink nest? Yang Kai nodded. And then, he pointed to the front with a perplexed expression. What happened to your black ink nest? The reason he came all the way here was to destroy this black ink nest. Besides the one here, he had decided to destroy all of the feudal lord black ink nests under He Yuan. Only by doing so could he deal the heaviest blow to He Yuan. After all the black ink nests were shattered, He Yuan and his subordinates would lose all of their foundation. This was a bigger contribution than killing several tens of thousands of black ink clansmen on the battlefield. My black ink nest. Zha Gu appeared furious. My black ink nest is a subnest of Sir Territory Lord's black ink nest. Since you've destroyed the Territory Lord's black ink nest, do you think the subnest wouldn't be affected? In fact, Yang Kai already had a speculation the moment he saw this black ink nest. However, when his speculation was verified by Zha Gu, he was still surprised. Prior to this, he wasn't aware that the death of a Territory Lord's black ink nest would affect the feudal lord black ink nests it spawned as well. After giving it a thought, though, he realized that it wasn't so surprising. Zha Gu's black ink nest was a subnest of He Yuan's black ink nest. So there was a close connection between them. Since He Yuan's black ink nest was destroyed, it was expected that Zha Gu's black ink nest would be implicated. Following a moment of deliberation, Yang Kai asked, "Is your black ink nest the only one that's been affected? Or have all the feudal lord black ink nests been implicated as well?" Zha Gu said through gritted teeth, "Do you think I'll tell you?" Yang Kai nodded. "Don't bother. I think I've figured it out." Judging from the situation Zha Gu was in, it wasn't hard to speculate that the other feudal lord black ink nests had been affected as well. They were probably all withering at this very moment. Initially, Yang Kai planned on destroying all the black ink nests in He Yuan's territory one by one. Now, it seemed that it wasn't necessary for him to do so. As a thought flashed through his mind, Yang Kai asked, "Brother Zha Gu, what if the royal lord's black ink nest is destroyed? Don't even dream about destroying any black ink nest ever again." Zha Gu roared. Apparently, he no longer wanted to listen to any of Yang Kai's nonsense. He extended his hand and summoned a giant halberd. At the same time, a dark fog swirled around his figure and soon, he was clad in an artifact armor that covered the upper half of his body. The giant halberd and artifact armor were the artifacts that Yang Kai previously refined for him. With the giant halberd in hand and the artifact armor on his body, Zha Gu appeared quite imposing. He directly thrust out his halberd at Yang Kai. Presently, Yang Kai was holding his azure dragon spear, and faced with the attack, he didn't intend to dodge. His spear thrust forward like a dragon and skirted past the giant halberd before jabbing towards Zha Gu's chest. A hint of ferocity flashed through Zha Gu's eyes as he also didn't intend to dodge the attack. He exerted even more force with the giant halberd as he was determined to wound the other party despite knowing that he would be injured as well. He was aware that Yang Kai was extraordinarily powerful. After all, he had witnessed Yang Kai going on a killing spree back then. Those feudal lords were as frail as paper tigers when they were dealing with Yang Kai, and Zha Gu didn't think he was more powerful than them. Even though he had 2 artifacts in his possession now, he didn't think he could defeat Yang Kai in a one-on-one fight. In order to survive, he had to take risks despite knowing he would get hurt as well. In fact, it was a good idea. But when the azure dragon spear easily stabbed into his chest and its explosive force shattered all the organs in his body, he still appeared bewildered. With a dispassionate expression, Yang Kai looked at him and said, "I'm the one who made that artifact armor. It's ridiculous that you think you can use it to defend against me." Zha Gu came to his senses and asked, "Are there weaknesses in all the things you've made?" Yang Kai roared, "The things I've made will not be used to go against my people. None of them will shed a drop of blood because of those artifacts. I was the one who helped you back then." The ferocity on Zha Gu's face faded. Faced with imminent death, he pleaded with the other man. Yang Kai looked around and nodded. "I can't deny the fact that you'd helped me before, but how did your black ink nest come about? How did you gather enough resources to hatch this black ink nest? Do you really think I have no idea? All you have now is because of me, and it's only apt that I am compensated for my work." As soon as he finished speaking, He channeled more world force into the Azure Dragon Spear, and Xiagu exploded, leaving no traces behind. There was no denying that they had gotten along pretty well, and Yang Kai had earned a lot of black ink coin with his help and made himself known as an expert in artifact refining. However, he was pretending to be a black ink disciple at that time, and Xiagu was just making use of him. They were fundamentally on different sides, so Yang Kai had no qualms about killing him. A feudal lord was still a pretty significant force on the battlefield, so if Yang Kai let him off on this day, some humans might be killed by him in the future. Xiagu was still in the early stage of building his fief, so he was the only feudal lord here and the rest of them were insignificant. There weren't even that many high-rank black ink clansmen. As Xiagu was dead, these black ink clansmen couldn't possibly ward off Yang Kai. Despite their resistance, they were all killed within a cup of tea's worth of time. By the time Yang Kai was gone, no one was alive in the fief. Yang Kai initially wanted to destroy all the feudal lord black ink nests under He Yuan's wings, but what he saw in Xiagu's fief made him realize that it wasn't necessary to do so. In fact, after a territory lord's black ink nest was destroyed, all the subnests it spawned would be affected. That explained why, after he destroyed He Yuan's black ink nest, the Black Ink clan became slower in their response. After He Yuan's black ink nest was destroyed, not only was the information network in He Yuan's territory disabled, but all the subnests had also withered. The feudal lords who had their own fiefs must be flustered now, so they wouldn't be in the mood to search for Yang Kai despite He Yuan's order. To play it safe, Yang Kai decided to head to another feudal lord's fief to see it for himself. Just like what happened in Xiagu's fief, the feudal lord's black ink nest was withering, and its black ink strength was leaking out. It would die in no time. Finally, Yang Kai could set his mind at ease. It never crossed his mind that destroying He Yuan's black ink nest would bring about such a pleasant surprise. It seemed that there were pros and cons when it came to the special connection between the black ink nests. Inferring from this, if the black ink nest in the royal city was destroyed, all the territory lords' black ink nests would wither, which would lead to the decline and eventual fall of all the black ink nests in Muguang's territory. Yang Kai couldn't help but have the urge to head back to the royal city and shatter the royal lord's black ink nest. Nevertheless, he soon gave up on the idea. This couldn't be helped as, given his current strength, he could only make a scene in a territory lord's territory as most of the black ink clansmen had gone to the battlefield. However, if he barged into the royal city, it would be akin to stepping right into the enemy's trap. He would be doomed. After all, there was more than one territory lord guarding the royal city. Although the old ancestor was powerful, the battle took place near the royal city, after all, so she might not gain the upper hand since she was on her own. Nevertheless, he wasn't in any position to worry about her. Given his current power, he was unable to intervene in the fight between the royal lord and the old ancestor. Perhaps Eighth Order masters could assist the old ancestor in this situation, but a Seventh Order master like him was still too weak. The reason the army had left Inyang Pass this time was that they had to facilitate Yang Kai's return. However, he was unable to circumvent the Black Ink clan and join up with those from Inyang Pass back then as he was in a horrible state. It was destined that the soldiers from Inyang Pass wouldn't achieve their goal. Therefore, Yang Kai speculated that the soldiers from Inyang Pass should have retreated by now. Presently, Inyang Pass must be surrounded by the Black Ink clan. The two races had gotten into a battle where one side would defend while the other side would attack. It was the pattern of battle they were most familiar with. Over the years, this kind of battle had taken place at every great pass numerous times. Be it the humans or the Black Ink clan, they were already familiar with how this would go. If that was indeed the case, the situation would be in Yang Kai's favor. Since the Black Ink clan's army had gathered outside of Inyang Pass, there wouldn't be any blockades in front of him. He could stealthily head to the battlefield and wait for a chance to return to the inner sanctum during the fighting. He had done the same thing when he and Feng Ying saved several hundred Black Ink disciples and brought them back to Blue Sky Pass previously. However, Yang Kai didn't intend to do that. He had a taste of successfully destroying He Yuan's Black Ink nest, which resulted in the fall of all its subnests. As this was a rare opportunity, Yang Kai naturally didn't want to miss it as he reckoned that it wouldn't come again. Therefore, he left He Yuan's territory several days later and headed towards another territory lord's territory. He had no idea whose territory it was, Nor did he know where that territory lord's home territory was. Regardless, it didn't matter to him. He directly headed to the feudal lord's fief nearest to him and went on a killing spree. In just half a day, most of the Black Ink clansmen in this fief were either dead or dying. Some of the Black Ink clansmen seized the chance to flee from the place, but Xianxia didn't have the intention of pursuing them. To him, destroying the Black Ink clan's foundation was the most important objective, while killing stray Black Ink clansmen came second. Moreover, the most powerful Black Ink clansmen in this fief had followed their feudal lord and left for the battlefield, so the ones who stayed back were undoubtedly weak. Xianxia then directly barged into the Black Ink nest in this place. This was a feudal lord's Black Ink nest, and with the prior experience of visiting Xiagu's Black Ink nest, Xianxia soon realized that the inner structures of all Black Ink nests were more or less the same. There were still some Black Ink clansmen inside the Black Ink nest, but they appeared oblivious to what had happened outside. The moment they saw a human entering this place, they were puzzled. They were all killed by Xianxia before they realized what was happening. A moment later, Xianxia stood inside an empty chamber and opened the portal of his small universe. His word force was instantly drawn by a powerful force and absorbed by the Black Ink nest. With his world force serving as a bridge, he was soon connected to the consciousness of this Black Ink nest. He had done the same thing in Xiagu's Black Ink nest back then, so he was familiar with the process. The next instant, Xianxia found himself in a special space where a lot of consciousnesses wandered around. This was the secret behind the information network that the Black Ink clan had built using the Black Ink nests. These Black Ink clansmen had entered this place through the consciousnesses of the feudal lord's Black Ink nests. They could then exchange all sorts of information here and find out what was going on in the other feudal lords' fiefs. After listening to them for a while, Xianxia realized that he couldn't gather any useful information. He wanted to find out what was going on at the front lines through the conversations between these consciousnesses. But the latest information from the battlefield was apparently not available to these Black Ink clansmen who stayed behind. Just when he was ready to carry out his plan, a message was sent from a consciousness. The message wasn't encrypted in any way, so the other consciousnesses could easily read it. Xianxia soon found out what the message was about. The royal lord is still in a fight with that human. I wonder if she can kill her. Another consciousness replied, that human is the old ancestor of Inyang Pass. Although the royal lord is powerful, it's not easy for her to kill that human. However, I heard that several territory lords have gone over to help. With their assistance, I believe that human will be defeated. No. From the looks of it, the royal lord is in a disadvantageous situation. Although she has the help of several territory lords, both parties are only equally matched now. The moment the message was sent, the other consciousnesses were evidently shocked. One of the consciousnesses asked, how could it be that the royal lord is at a disadvantage? They've fought with each other countless times in the past, and they've always been equally matched. Neither side could defeat the other. What happened this time? The consciousness from earlier replied, I have no idea, but for some reason, they arrived somewhere near our fief and continued fighting. My feudal lord was the one who saw it. Fortunately, they soon left. Otherwise, our fief would have been destroyed. We wouldn't be able to defend against the fallout from their battle. Could it be that the royal lord hasn't recovered? That's possible. However, the royal lord has the help of some territory lords now, so the human old ancestor certainly won't get the upper hand. The consciousnesses continued chatting and soon changed the topic. Although Xianxia hadn't gathered a lot of information, he had at least found out that the old ancestor was fine. On the other hand, he was surprised at the fact that the royal lord had fallen into a disadvantageous position. It never crossed his mind that the seemingly unreliable old ancestor from Inyang Pass would be so powerful, able to battle against the royal lord and several territory lords on her own. He wondered what the outcome of the battle would be. Nevertheless, he didn't have the right to interfere in this matter, and he had bigger fish to fry. He then focused on sensing his surroundings. According to Xiagu, this special space was actually a platform linked to the consciousness of the territory lord's Black Ink nest. The consciousnesses of the subnests could easily connect to it, which allowed the feudal lords to communicate with one another. In that case, Xianxia reckoned that he could make use of it and find out the whereabouts of the Territory Lord's black ink nest. Following the faint traces, Xianxia's consciousness tracked the signs back to the source and soon found what he was looking for. Although he wasn't certain about the exact location of the Territory Lord's black ink nest, he was confident that he got the direction right. As long as he moved in that direction, he would find the Territory Lord's black ink nest. Since he had achieved his goal, he retracted his divine sense and left the feudal Lord black ink nest before shooting into the sky. He didn't waste any of his energy to destroy this feudal Lord's black ink nest, since all the feudal Lord black ink nests were linked to the Territory Lord's black ink nest. As long as he destroyed the source, all the feudal Lord black ink nests would wither as well. The moment Xianxia's consciousness left this special space, a certain consciousness temporarily fell into a dazed state in another similar but even more magnificent space. The consciousnesses of the feudal Lord's black ink nests would gather together in the special space transformed from the consciousness of the Territory Lord's black ink nest. Similarly, the consciousnesses of the Territory Lord's black ink nests would assemble in the special space transformed from the consciousness of the Royal Lord's black ink nest. This even bigger space was where the consciousness of the Royal Lord's black ink nest was located. The consciousnesses that had gathered together in this place came from the Territory Lord's black ink nests. Hence, the consciousnesses in this place represented the Territory Lords. Upon detecting the anomaly, the other consciousnesses quickly inquired about it. The consciousness from earlier fell silent for a moment and said hesitantly, "Just now, someone seemed to be searching for my location." "Someone was searching for your location?" Another consciousness asked curiously. The third consciousness was equally inquisitive. "What's the point of ascertaining your location? Are you mistaken?" The first consciousness replied, "Maybe. I'm not sure about it." Since he had said so, the other consciousnesses stopped asking about it. This matter ended here, and they went on to talk about another topic. "What's going on with that human named Xianxia? Has Sir He Yuan captured him?" "There's no news about him yet, but it seems that human has destroyed Sir He Yuan's black ink nest." "What? Sir He Yuan's black ink nest was destroyed? When did that happen?" Another consciousness exclaimed. It was apparent that he had not heard about this news yet. "It happened not long ago. The person guarding the black ink nest sent me a message at the last moment." Apparently, the human named Xianxia directly invaded Sir He Yuan's home territory. "Now, we can't contact anyone from Sir He Yuan's side. Our connection with them has been cut off." The other consciousnesses fell into silence. All of these consciousnesses felt their hearts sinking at the revelation that a human had destroyed a Territory Lord's black ink nest. At the same time, they felt furious and humiliated. The consciousnesses felt that the topic was too depressing, so they quickly moved on to another. They started discussing the war between the two races and tried to speculate on the outcome. While they were engrossed in the discussion, a certain consciousness suddenly exclaimed. As the conversation was cut off, the other consciousnesses looked at him in puzzlement. The consciousness explained, "Some feudal lords reported to me that the human named Xianxia came to our territory." "He's in your territory? What is he doing there?" "Regardless of what he is up to, quickly inform Sir He Yuan about it so that he can come over to help. Also, mobilize the Black Ink clansmen in your territory and restrain the human until Sir He Yuan arrives. We must not let him flee." "Got it." The moment the consciousness finished speaking, he passed on an order through the Black Ink Nest network, and the Black Ink clansmen in his territory started taking action. The other consciousnesses waited with concern as they asked about what was going on from time to time. Certainly, the consciousness wouldn't hide anything from them. Half a day later, a consciousness suddenly said in a puzzled manner, "The human doesn't seem to be running away from Sir He Yuan. Instead, go on. It seems that he has targeted my territory lord's black ink nest." Upon hearing that, the other consciousnesses paled, especially the one who represented the area of the territory lord's black ink nest where Xianxia was located. Just then, another consciousness said, "Earlier, you said that someone was trying to figure out your location, right?" The consciousness that represented the area of the territory lord's black ink nest where Xianxia was located replied, "Yes, that's what I felt. Wait, you mean... That's right. The human named Yang Kai didn't know the exact location of your territory lord's black ink nest. So he made use of a feudal lord's black ink nest to find it. He then headed straight to your place after that. His target is the territory lord's black ink nest. What? The consciousness exclaimed. What should I do? What about Sir He Yuan? Have you reached him? Sir He Yuan is on his way, but he's still far away from the human. It seems that he can't arrive in time to stop him. Assemble the feudal lords to stall him. We must not let that human destroy another territory lord's black ink nest. Otherwise, it will be a humiliation we can never wipe away. When Sir He Yuan reaches there, he'll easily capture that human. It's too late. The consciousness sounded despondent. Why? It seems that Yang Kai has arrived. I can feel the fluctuations of battle outside. It's not a human. It's... What are you talking about? What do you see? It's a monster that's several tens of thousands of meters long with a humongous spear in its claws. The feudal lords can't block him. It's heading straight for the black ink. Arg! The shriek sent a shockwave across the other consciousnesses. Although they were not the ones experiencing the disaster, they could feel how heart-wrenching it must have been for their companion the moment they heard the shriek. Feelings of panic and fear overwhelmed these consciousnesses, causing them to tremble. The black ink nest's consciousness was a medium through which one could connect with the other consciousnesses via divine sense. Although one could communicate with others swiftly and easily, he had to promptly cut off the connection when he fell into danger. Otherwise, his soul would die following the destruction of the black ink nest. This was an unbearable pain for any living creature. This won't end here, the consciousness wailed. The message made the entire space descend into despair. The next moment, the consciousness vanished into thin air, as though he had never existed before. The other consciousness fell into silence in this special space. Another consciousness tried to contact him, but regardless of how hard he tried, he couldn't reach the other side. In the meantime, in a particular territory lord's home territory, a colossal black ink nest was cut down by the azure dragon spear. A violent force caused the entire black ink nest to collapse, and countless black ink clansmen lost their lives while the expansive territory shattered. Those black ink clansmen tried their hardest to repel the enemy, and many attacks of varying power were sent out at the 30,000-meter-long dragon. Although most of the attacks were weak, they came in massive numbers. The golden dragon's scales on the dragon trembled upon impact, and as its gigantic figure flew across the void, dragon blood fell to the ground. Yang Kai didn't intend to keep fighting with them. After destroying the black ink nest and killing those who got in his way, he went on to snatch up as many resources as he could before turning around and escaping. A while later, he withdrew his dragon form and returned to his human form. Following that, he manipulated space principles and disappeared from the place with a flicker. The black ink clansmen dashed out of the broken territory and fearlessly pursued their hated enemy. However, they soon lost track of Yang Kai and could only aimlessly search for him. The territory lord's territory behind them was now in a giant mess. After a long time of silence, the consciousnesses that had gathered together in the grand space formed from the consciousness of the royal lord's black ink nest finally started reacting. One of the consciousnesses said, "Another territory lord's black ink nest has been destroyed. We haven't received any definitive news yet, so it's too early to say that. The truth is right before our eyes. Why else wouldn't we be able to contact them? You might want to deny it, but you can't change the fact that a calamity has happened." It was a several tens of thousands of meters long monster with a huge spear in its claws that destroyed the black ink nest? What was it? It's a grand dragon. According to the black ink disciples, a grand dragon is a powerful being. Sir He Yuan's black ink nest was destroyed by that same grand dragon. Furthermore, from what I've gathered, Yang Kai is not a human. The grand dragon is his true form. I don't care whether he's a human or grand dragon. He's destroyed 2 territory lord black ink nests so far, and I don't have to remind all of you that before our comrade passed away earlier, he said that it won't end here. I'm sure you all know what that means. A consciousness asked in horror. Does that mean that Yang Kai is going to destroy even more territory lord black ink nests? In order to repel the human army, the territory lords have left for the battlefield with their respective armies. Apart from a few territory lords who have remained in the royal lord's territory to guard the royal city and coordinate other matters, there are no powerful masters left. Moreover, some of those territory lords had to join up with the royal lord to fight against the human old ancestor. It's not surprising that Yang Kai would seize this chance to raise chaos. Although Sir He Yuan has been hunting him down, he hasn't managed to achieve his goals so far. The human's next target could be me, or any one of you. Upon hearing that, those consciousnesses became apprehensive. We can't pin all our hopes on Sir He Yuan. To put it bluntly, if he was able to capture the human, the second black ink nest wouldn't have been destroyed. We have to save ourselves. How are you going to do that? That human is too powerful. We can't fend him off even if we have a lot of subordinates with us. Regardless of how powerful he is on his own. Moreover, he must be injured after destroying 2 territory lord black ink nest. I believe he'll have to recuperate for some time before acting again, so all of you don't have to worry. However, once he recovers, he'll probably make a move again. Do you have a suggestion? Tell us about it. The consciousness then told everyone about his plan, and the rest of them nodded in agreement. Life hadn't been peaceful in Mu Guang's royal domain recently. First of all, the royal lord's plan that was hundreds of years in the making was derailed by a human just before its imminent success, flushing all her efforts down the drain. Then, the old ancestor of Inyang Pass suddenly appeared in her territory and started a huge fight against her and several territory lords. Space shattered and many Black Ink clan fiefs were devastated while countless Black Ink clansmen were killed from the fallout of their battle. The human army from Inyang Pass had also gone all out. The territory lords in the royal domain had no choice but to lead their own armies to deal with the humans. The Black Ink clansmen who stayed behind had no idea what was going on at the front line. Usually, they just had to wait patiently. After all, even though the humans were powerful, they could never break through the Black Ink clan's blockade and storm the royal domain. However, there was now a lone human who was raising all kinds of havoc in the royal domain when most of the powerful Black Ink clansmen were not around. He was the very human who derailed the royal lord's plan. This human wasn't particularly powerful. According to the classification of the humans, he was just a 7th-order master equivalent to a feudal lord. Nevertheless, it was this 7th-order human who threw Mu Guang's royal domain into absolute chaos. In just half a month, he managed to destroy 2 territory lord Black Ink nests and killed several tens of thousands of Black Ink clansmen. Although He Yuan was personally hunting him down, he hadn't achieved his goal so far. From what they had gathered, this human could transform into a several tens of thousands of meters long grand dragon and wield a gigantic spear in his claws. Once he got close, he could destroy a territory lord Black Ink nest with one strike and shatter the universe fragment it sat on. The reason he was able to evade He Yuan's pursuit for so long was that he was a master in the Tao of space. With the help of space secret techniques, this human could move with shocking speed. Even if He Yuan was stronger than he was, he couldn't capture the human intruder without being able to restrict his movements first. After destroying 2 territory lord Black Ink nests, the human went missing. However, the consciousnesses staying in the territory lord Black Ink nests believed that he was recuperating somewhere. When he fully recovered, he would make a move on another territory lord's Black Ink nest. This made the consciousnesses staying in the territory lord Black Ink nests feel anxious as they were worried that one of them would be Yang Kai's next target. Black Ink clansmen were seen thoroughly searching for Yang Kai across the void, leaving no stone unturned. Nevertheless, they couldn't find the human after several days, as though he had vanished into thin air. This made many Black Ink clansmen suspect that Yang Kai might have left Mu Guang's royal domain. One day, a team of 20 or so were examining a cluster of thick Black Ink clouds. From what they had gathered, this human liked hiding in places like this. Therefore, the Black Ink clouds of different sizes that scattered across the void would be thoroughly inspected. After all, no one knew if he was hiding in a certain Black Ink cloud, just waiting to catch the nearby Black Ink clansmen off guard. After they inspected all of the Black Ink clouds here though, they still couldn't find the human. Just when the team of Black Ink clansmen were preparing to leave, the leading high-rank clansman detected something and turned to look in a particular direction. What came into his sight astounded him, for a series of ripples had suddenly appeared in the void. As the ripples expanded, a portal glowing with a faint light abruptly formed. This high-rank black ink clansman was a quick-witted person, instantly realized something, and hurriedly ordered, "Hide!" After he finished speaking, he led his team to charge into the nearest black ink cloud. They concealed themselves and withdrew their auras as best they could as quickly as possible. As they lifted their gazes, they saw that a portal had fully taken shape. While the ripples continued to expand, a figure appeared all of a sudden. He was the human that the Black Ink clan had been looking for. The high-rank clansman narrowed his eyes and soon realized something. It was no wonder that so many Black Ink clansmen were unable to find a trace of this human, even after several days of searching. It turned out he had been hiding inside a sealed world. The portal that suddenly opened up was obviously a portal that led to that sealed world. Despite the distance between them, the high-rank clansman could clearly feel the aura coming from the portal. It was the aura of the world force that the Black Ink clan loved the most. So, that's how it is. Upon figuring out everything, the high-rank Black Ink clansman couldn't help but think that Xianxia was blessed with luck to have found a sealed world and hidden inside it. It seemed that the news they had received was true. Xianxia had been badly injured when destroying the previous Territory Lord Black Ink nest and was hiding and recuperating recently. Although there were over 20 members in the group he led, this high-rank Black Ink clansman didn't dare to make a rash move upon sighting Xianxia. He knew that this human was too powerful for them and he and his team were no match for him. Exposing themselves at this point would be no different from committing suicide. Despite acting swiftly though, Xianxia, who had just stepped out of the sealed world, still sensed something and quickly looked in their direction. Apparently, he had realized they were there. As their eyes met, the high-rank clansman felt a chill shoot up his spine. Before he could react, Xianxia pushed out his palm as his Seventh Order Open Heaven Realms world force burst forth. Without having a chance to resist, the Black Ink clansmen hiding in the Black Ink cloud were all instantly killed. The high-rank Black Ink clansman thought that Xianxia was simply lucky enough to have found a sealed world to recuperate in, but the truth was that luck only played a part in it. As a master of the Tao of space, Xianxia could easily find sealed worlds that the Black Ink clan hadn't discovered. Not only had he been recuperating during this period of time, but he had also picked clean all of the resources in this particular sealed world. Although he had already obtained an astonishing harvest from robbing the home territories of 2 territory lords, Xianxia didn't mind collecting even more resources. He was already pleased that he could snatch so much from the Black Ink clan, and it was even more satisfying that he had also destroyed 2 territory lord Black Ink nests. Just like the Black Ink clan expected, Xianxia's next target was still a territory lord's Black Ink nest. Nevertheless, even though he had killed this search party, another nearby group of Black Ink clansmen soon noticed what happened. Realizing that Xianxia might have appeared, they quickly spread the word. By the time everyone found out that Xianxia had reappeared, he had arrived at a feudal lord's fief. With the previous experiences, Xianxia was already familiar with how to look for the local territory lord's Black Ink nest. The Black Ink clansmen in this feudal lord's fief were weak, so it only took Xianxia a little effort to kill them all. He then headed straight to the feudal lord's Black Ink nest. The moment he entered the central chamber, he opened his small universe and let the Black Ink nest absorb his world force. With that serving as a bridge, he connected himself with the Black Ink nest's consciousness. Just a moment later, his divine sense entered the special space with the Black Ink nest's consciousness as the medium. As usual, there were a lot of consciousnesses in this special space. These consciousnesses represented the feudal lords who had their own fiefs and Black Ink nests. Many of the feudal lords had left for the battlefield to fight against the humans. Despite that, other Black Ink clansmen could stay back and guard their Black Ink nests. Hence, Xianxia wasn't surprised one bit. However, he soon realized that something was off. Previously, when he entered this space with his consciousness, the other consciousnesses didn't pay much attention to him. However, on this day, all the consciousnesses around him appeared hostile to him. Xianxia could clearly feel that these consciousnesses were paying close attention to him. Hostility and formidable powers exuded from these consciousnesses. Was I exposed? A thought flashed through Xianxia's mind, But he soon realized something. In fact, it wasn't surprising. He had done the same thing before, so it was expected that the Black Ink clan had put their guard up. Nevertheless, since he had the audacity to make a move, he had the confidence to keep himself safe. The consciousnesses didn't intend to say anything to Yang Kai. The moment Yang Kai understood all this, however, the special space froze as a restrictive power spread across it, like a heaven-sealing earth-locking array. Yang Kai instantly appeared surprised, for he had never expected that such a turn of events would happen in this space. With that said, this space was transformed from the consciousness of a territory lord's black ink nest, so it wasn't surprising that there were secrets that he wasn't aware of. He tried cutting off his connection with the black ink nest, but he realized that it wasn't possible to do so. The space had been completely sealed up, so unless he could shatter this place's barriers, he couldn't possibly withdraw his divine sense. If he forcefully tried, his soul might be damaged. It seemed that his consciousness had been locked inside this space. "I've been waiting for you." The moment the space was sealed off, a voice reached him, one that sounded furious and vexed. Yang Kai could sense that this consciousness gave off a familiar aura. Moreover, this consciousness was unlike the others. It was far more powerful. It was like a crane standing among the chickens. A doubtful Yang Kai asked, "Hey Yuan." The consciousness roared, "I'm glad that you recognize me." Yang Kai was astounded. "It's really you. So, you were waiting for me?" Hey Yuan replied, "N. I knew that you wouldn't stop trying to destroy the other territory lord's black ink nests, so I chose one and waited for you. It surprises me that you really came to Kong Chan's territory. It seems that I'm in luck." Yang Kai had no idea who Kong Chan was, but he reckoned that he was the owner of this territory, and a territory lord. The reason He Yuan decided to wait here was that Kong Chan's territory was the closest to the territory lord's territory, where the black ink nest was previously destroyed by Yang Kai. He reckoned that Yang Kai would most likely come to this area. Now, it seemed that his wait was worth it, for Yang Kai had really come to this place. At that instant, He Yuan felt slightly less aggrieved. As a territory lord, he was equivalent to an 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Master. However, he had been trying to hunt Yang Kai down recently, but he couldn't even find out the latter's whereabouts. It was expected that he was frustrated. Having fought with Yang Kai several times, He Yuan was now aware that the other man was proficient in the Tao of space, which could be utilized to swiftly escape from his enemies. That was the reason Yang Kai could always shake off his pursuit. Presently though, Yang Kai's consciousness was sealed off in this space. Since he was unable to use his biggest strength, he was basically trapped. "Keep him alive. Don't kill him," He Yuan ordered. He still remembered Mu Guang's order that Yang Kai had to be captured alive so that he could replace Nye and to preside over the construction of warships. If he killed Yang Kai here, he wouldn't be able to explain himself to the royal lord. Following his command, the surrounding consciousnesses exuded powerful forces which then blasted at Yang Kai. Every territory lord had a few dozen feudal lords who had their own fiefs, and Kong Chan was no exception. He had about 30 feudal lords who had their own fiefs. Therefore, roughly the same amount of consciousnesses belonging to feudal lords were here. If these feudal lords came across Yang Kai in their physical bodies, they wouldn't dare to provoke him. After all, a large number of feudal lords were killed by Yang Kai recently. Despite being a 7th Order human, he was more powerful than any 7th Order master they had dealt with before. However, this space was transformed from the black ink nest's consciousnesses, so the feudal lords didn't have to directly face Yang Kai. They could achieve their goal simply by confronting Yang Kai's consciousness. That was the solution that they came up with after Yang Kai went missing previously. It was a trap targeted specifically at Yang Kai. This wasn't the only trap, though, as similar traps had been set up in every territory lord's territory. In other words, whichever territory lord's territory that Yang Kai headed to, he would fall into the same trap if he dared to make use of the black ink nests. The only difference was that only Kong Chan's territory had He Yuan assuming command. The other territory lords' territories only had feudal lords who were patiently waiting for Yang Kai to show up. With that said, regardless of whether there was a territory lord around or not, as long as Yang Kai stepped into such a trap, he would never be able to run away. He could only escape by defeating all the consciousnesses here, but that was practically impossible. These consciousnesses exuded powerful forces as a tide of violent energy soon formed in the special space and shot towards Xianxia like a tsunami. This became a battle between souls. Xianxia couldn't help but turn solemn. He had never expected that the Black Ink clan would deal with him using such a trick, nor was he aware that the space transformed from the Black Ink nest's consciousnesses could trap a person's consciousness inside. Nevertheless, since he had fallen into the trap, he had no choice but to act accordingly. Fortunately, he was no ordinary open heaven realm master. Faced with the tide of powerful attacks, Xianxia's consciousness appeared small in comparison. It seemed that he would directly perish the moment the waves struck him. He Yuan, who was watching on the side, couldn't help but be worried. What if Xianxia couldn't withstand this bombardment and was killed directly? It had to be noted that if a consciousness passed away in this space, its body back in the Black Ink nest would become a soulless husk. It was just a matter of time before such a person would die. While He Yuan was watching with concern, Xianxia's consciousness was drowned in the tide. All of a sudden, an explosive power burst out from Xianxia's consciousness and warded off the strike. He was as unshakable as a rock. An astounded He Yuan exclaimed, "Impossible! If he were in Xianxia's place, he wouldn't have been able to fend off the joint assault of 30 feudal lords." According to his estimation, the best outcome would be that Xianxia's consciousness was instantly injured. Once that happened, he would lose the ability to fight. Presently, following He Yuan's order, a large number of Black Ink clansmen were rushing towards Xianxia's real body. As Xianxia would be unable to flee, they could easily capture him. However, the sight before He Yuan's eyes was simply unbelievable, for Xianxia had flawlessly defended himself against all the attacks from the feudal lords' consciousnesses. How was that even possible? Why was a seventh-order human's soul so powerful? Although the feudal lords didn't use their full powers following He Yuan's order, the sight before the latter's eyes was still inconceivable. Besides He Yuan, these feudal lords couldn't believe their eyes either, and they promptly exerted more force with their attacks. The tide rose again and became even more violent. Xianxia's consciousness was finally affected. Faced with the bombardment of the Black Ink clansmen, he felt his spiritual energy being drained rapidly. He couldn't endure attacks of such intensity for long. Fortunately, Xianxia had obtained the soul-warming lotus when he was just a budding cultivator. Over the years, his soul became much stronger than other cultivators in the same realm because he had continuous nourishment coming from the soul-warming lotus. Furthermore, his spiritual energy had increased significantly after he obtained Yu Ru Meng's primordial yin. It had to be noted that charm demons were the best when it came to utilizing spiritual energy, not to mention that Yu Ru Meng was a demon saint at the time. Although he was just a 7th-order open heaven realm master now, Xianxia's soul was on par with an 8th-order human master's. That was the reason he could ward off the tide of the feudal lords' consciousnesses on his own. In this space, a consciousness was the manifestation of one's soul, so the stronger a person's soul was, the stronger they were in this place. On top of that, most of the Black Ink clansmen were not experts in using their souls. However, Xianxia reckoned that the Royal Lord's secret technique that was exclusive to the Royal Lords must be a form of soul technique. These feudal lords were basically trying to show off meager skills before an expert by trying to fight Xianxia with their consciousnesses alone. With that said, even though he could temporarily defend himself from the bombardment, he couldn't persevere for long. After all, he couldn't endure the barrage of attacks forever, regardless of how impenetrable his defense was. Furthermore, his consciousness was trapped in this special space, so he had no idea what was going on in the outside world. If the Black Ink clan seized the chance to harm his physical body, he wouldn't even be able to defend himself. Therefore, after tentatively defending himself for a moment, he decided to act ruthlessly. The Black Ink clansmen, who were ready to channel more of their powers to suppress Xianxia, suddenly felt chills running down their spines. Before they could figure out what was going on, Xianxia's aura flared up. His powerful consciousness slowly solidified in this special space and turned into a soul avatar. What astonished these feudal lords was that this soul avatar was holding a saber. The feudal lords were befuddled while He Yuan was flabbergasted. Over the years, they had never seen a consciousness that could take on his true form in this place. The communication between consciousnesses had always been accomplished in a kind of intangible form. How powerful must a person's soul be in order to actually take on a visible, almost solid form? What made them feel despondent was that they had no idea why there was a saber here. How did Yang Kai bring an artifact to this space where only consciousnesses were supposed to exist? Was this a special skill unique to the humans? They had never interacted with the humans' consciousnesses before. However, the Black Ink nests belonged to the Black Ink clan, so why was a human in a favorable position in this place? The feudal lords thought that the saber was an artifact Yang Kai brought to this place, and in fact, they weren't wrong. However, this weapon was no ordinary artifact. It was a soul-type artifact. It was the Emperor artifact Soul-Splitting Saber. This was an artifact that Yang Kai had obtained all the way back when he was still in the Hung Luo star field. He was still weak at that time, so this Emperor artifact was of great help to him when it came to killing his enemies. However, as his strength increased, this Emperor artifact was no longer useful to him. He simply kept Soul-Splitting Saber in his soul and had not used it for years. It never crossed his mind that he would use this Emperor artifact again one day. Although this Emperor artifact was too weak compared to his current realm, it was better than fighting against the feudal lord's consciousnesses with only his raw spiritual energy. After all, he was on his own while the Black Ink clansmen came at him in large numbers. With the soul-splitting saber in hand, Yang Kai felt his murderous intent surging and grinned. "Don't worry. I'll make this quick." The moment he finished speaking, he brandished his saber as a cold light slashed across this special space. Yang Kai's powerful spiritual energy allowed the light of the soul-splitting saber to fill the entire space. Following the attack, the consciousnesses of 4 feudal lords died in silence. At the same time, the feudal lords, who were respectively in charge of 4 Black Ink nests in Kong Chan's territory, collapsed to the ground. Although they were still technically alive, they were now completely immobile. The destruction of their consciousnesses meant that they wouldn't survive for long. The power of the saber astonished the feudal lords. The barrage of attacks, which was the agglomeration of the feudal lords' consciousnesses, instantly weakened. With most of the pressure lifted off, Yang Kai slashed with his saber again. This time, the feudal lords promptly dodged the attack, so only 2 were killed. Still, they were shaken to the core after witnessing the power of the saber twice. They initially thought that they could easily capture Yang Kai with this trap, but they had never expected that this human was actually so ferocious. Even though he was in a trap set up by the Black Ink clan, he was still the one slaughtering them. Faced with the threat of death, the feudal lords' consciousnesses tried to flee from this place in a hurry. After all, none of them wanted to be killed, especially when Yang Kai was chasing after them with his strange saber. To their dismay, though, they soon realized that they were unable to leave this place. The moment Yang Kai's consciousness barged into this special space, it was completely sealed off. Only He Yuan, who was in charge of this place, could open it again. Apparently, He Yuan didn't have the intention of opening this space. The turn of events not only startled the feudal lords, but also He Yuan. He had never expected that instead of harming Yang Kai, the trap they had set up in advance became a battlefield where they were the ones being slaughtered. Nevertheless, he soon came to his senses. Seeing that the feudal lords' consciousnesses were trying to run away from Yang Kai, he roared, "Stand and fight! We must not let him flee this time." This chance was hard to come by, and if they let Yang Kai escape, He Yuan didn't have the confidence to trap him again. Regardless of the price he had to pay, he had to defeat and capture Yang Kai today. The next instant, He Yuan took the initiative to charge towards Yang Kai. His consciousness, which was even more powerful than the rest, clashed with Yang Kai. Yang Kai's consciousness, which had basically replicated his true form, was caught off guard and staggered backwards upon impact, while the light around him also dimmed. The instant Yang Kai was attacked, he responded with his saber. He Yuan's consciousness promptly backed off, but he couldn't be as quick as the saber light. Struck by the saber light, He Yuan groaned in pain like an injured beast. His powerful consciousness weakened in an instant, and it was obvious that he was wounded. As horror overwhelmed him, thinking that he was doomed, He Yuan heard something crack. As his consciousness refocused, he realized that the saber in the hands of Yang Kai's avatar had shattered upon impact. An elated He Yuan roared at the feudal lords who were running away. "His weapon has been destroyed. Do not fear." Upon hearing that, the feudal lords turned around and realized that, just like what He Yuan had said, the saber in Yang Kai's hands had fallen apart for some reason. In an instant, they become energized. The consciousnesses were all essentially naked, so the feudal lords were stunned when they saw Yang Kai summoning a saber. After He Yuan was done barking, he madly activated his power and charged towards Yang Kai. Seeing that, the feudal lords promptly assisted him. At that moment, Yang Kai was immensely pressured. In the end, the soul-splitting saber was just an emperor artifact. Although it had been nurtured in his soul over the years, its original quality couldn't be changed. It couldn't bear the power of Yang Kai's spiritual energy, so 3 strikes had been its limit. Therefore, before Yang Kai could kill all of his enemies, the saber broke apart. Presently, with He Yuan leading the charge, the attacks from the feudal lords' consciousnesses came right at Yang Kai in a continuous manner from all directions. Regardless of how powerful Yang Kai's soul was, he couldn't possibly bear such a bombardment. Seeing that Yang Kai's consciousness became immobile, as though it had been suppressed, the feudal lords struck their opponent harder, determined to take him down. Yang Kai was aware that he was in an unfavorable position. It had to be said that the Black Ink clan had come up with a brilliant method to deal with him. In such a place, space principles were practically useless. This was purely a contest of the strength of their spiritual energy. He had to quickly come up with a solution. Otherwise, he would be doomed. At the most critical moment, Yang Kai realized that since he could summon the soul-splitting saber to this place, what about the soul-warming lotus? The soul-warming lotus was a supreme treasure, so if he could summon it, there wouldn't be any suspense regarding the outcome of this battle. However, he had never summoned the soul-warming lotus to fight his enemies before. Usually, he would only counterattack when others attempted to invade his knowledge sea. So the idea of summoning it hadn't crossed his mind. As he thought about this, a 7-colored light burst from his figure. When the feudal lords, who were bombarding Yang Kai with their attacks, saw the light, they were bewildered. He Yuan had no idea what was going on either, but through his battles with Yang Kai, he came to realize that this human had all sorts of tricks up his sleeve. Therefore, the moment the 7-colored light appeared, he felt that something was off and promptly shouted, "Take him down, now!" As soon as he finished speaking, he focused all of his power and charged towards Yang Kai. At this moment, he had no choice but to ignore the royal lord's order that Yang Kai had to be captured alive. Whether Yang Kai could survive the strike would depend on his luck. Invisible attacks came right at Yang Kai from all directions and drowned him. However, the 7-colored light only became brighter and soon filled the space. A moment later, the storm subsided as the originally noisy space fell silent. A lotus that radiated a light of 7 colors abruptly appeared in the place where Yang Kai previously stood. The lotus spun gently, exuding an aura that the Black Ink clansmen coveted. "What is that?" one of the puzzled feudal lords asked. Although he had no idea what this 7-colored lotus was, he could clearly feel that it was hugely beneficial to any Black Ink clansman who could possess it. "Where is he?" There was another feudal lord who was concerned about Yang Kai's whereabouts. Other than the 7-colored lotus sitting in the place where Yang Kai previously stood, the human himself was nowhere in sight. "I suppose he's dead. Although he is strong, he couldn't possibly survive that bombardment. Well done. That human was too arrogant as he had no regard for us. He deserved his death." Besides these feudal lords, He Yuan also believed that Yang Kai had perished. Yang Kai had indeed showcased powerful spiritual energy, but regardless of how formidable he was, he couldn't possibly stave off the joint attack of all the feudal lords and He Yuan. However, if Yang Kai was really killed, how was He Yuan going to explain himself to the royal lord? This was giving He Yuan a headache. Also, what was this 7-colored lotus that Yang Kai had left behind? While he was puzzled, the flower petals of the spinning 7-colored lotus started to unfurl, and as that happened, a figure revealed itself. Seated among the stamens, This person radiated a vague glow. Upon making out the person's face, He Yuan was shocked. That was because not only wasn't Yang Kai dead, he wasn't even wounded. How can this be? He might have been lucky enough to have survived the bombardment of attacks, but how was it possible that he wasn't injured at all? Could the strange lotus have blocked all their attacks? Before He Yuan could figure it out, Yang Kai's soul power burst forth. The power of this soul was as magnificent as the ocean and as profound as the abyss. As the mass of spiritual energy increased in intensity, the special space started trembling. It wouldn't be polite if I didn't offer a gift in return. Please accept this. The moment the clear voice reverberated across the space, clearly discernible spirit energy turned into visible saber lights that pointed in all directions as they hovered above Yang Kai's head. Faced with the saber lights, the feudal lords felt chills running down their spines. As soon as Yang Kai finished speaking, the spiritual energy saber lights shot out in all directions and mercilessly rained down on them. The feudal lords were horrified as they all scrambled to escape or defend themselves. Nevertheless, their efforts were futile. As the saber lights swept across the space, half of the feudal lords' consciousnesses were destroyed. Even He Yuan was struck by 2 saber lights and roared in pain. The surviving feudal lords' consciousnesses all trembled in fear. He Yuan knew that if they let Yang Kai attack again, all of the Black Ink clansmen here would be killed. Yang Kai's soul was unimaginably powerful. Besides that, he had a lot of special offensive skills when it came to the soul, something that the Black Ink clan were not aware of previously. The attacks of He Yuan and the feudal lords were all blocked by the 7-colored lotus. As a result, Yang Kai wasn't harmed one bit. Now, He Yuan could confirm that the reason Yang Kai was safe earlier was that the latter had the strange 7-colored lotus. He wondered what kind of treasure it was that could defend against so many spiritual energy attacks. Even a territory lord like him was unable to hurt Yang Kai despite having personally made a move. The defensive strength of the 7-colored lotus was simply impenetrable. With the protection of the 7-colored soul-warming lotus, Yang Kai had no more worries. As his spiritual energy condensed into another attack, he slashed out at the surviving Black Ink clansmen. More and more of the feudal lords were eliminated, and inside the feudal lord Black Ink nests in Kong Chan's territory, numerous bodies passed out and collapsed to the ground. These feudal lords no longer reacted regardless of how loud the other Black Ink clansmen called out to them. Within moments, fewer than 5 of the original 30 feudal lord remained. These consciousnesses were running about madly as Yang Kai relentlessly chased after them, completely powerless to counterattack. He Yuan's aura was also weakening by the breath. It was not possible to use any kind of technique in a pure clash of spiritual energy. So in such a place, it was hard for He Yuan to use his formidable strength. Finally, one of the feudal lords shouted, "Sir He Yuan, we can't persevere any longer. Please open this space. Otherwise, all of us will die." He Yuan was unperturbed though, for he firmly believed that the 7-colored lotus wasn't as impenetrable as it seemed. He thought that by exerting more force with his attacks, he could shatter the lotus defense. However, his goal was still not achieved after so many of the feudal lords' consciousnesses perished. Regardless, their defeat in this place didn't mean that the Black Ink clan had lost. They still had a chance to turn things around. That was because the moment Yang Kai entered the space through the Black Ink nest's power, He Yuan managed to ascertain his whereabouts. This could be achieved easily, for Yang Kai made use of a feudal lord's Black Ink nest to come into this space. Just by finding out which Black Ink nest it was, He Yuan could effortlessly discover where Yang Kai was. After all, the fiefs and Black Ink nests of the feudal lords were fixed. Therefore, the moment Yang Kai's consciousness entered the space, He Yuan ordered more than 10 feudal lords to rush over to Yang Kai's location. He Yuan's initial plan was to damage Yang Kai's consciousness so that this team could easily capture him in a weakened state. However, things were not going to plan. Not only was Yang Kai not injured, but he had also made use of a 7-colored lotus to commit a massacre. They were not in a favorable position in this special space, so it was inevitable that so many feudal lords' consciousnesses were wiped out. Nevertheless, as long as Yang Kai's consciousness was trapped here, He couldn't return to his body, and the team that He Yuan had sent would soon capture Yang Kai. That was the reason He Yuan refused to open this space despite the fact that so many feudal lords were injured or dead. There was still a ray of hope for them to turn things around. With that said, regardless of how swift the team of feudal lords were, it would take them at least 4 hours to arrive at the black ink nest where Yang Kai was located. Could He Yuan persevere for another 4 hours? He had no idea, but he knew that there were not a lot of feudal lords' consciousnesses left. Once they were all dead, he would have to face Yang Kai alone. Despite the fact that a lot of feudal lords were killed, He Yuan continuously channeled his power to attack the seven-colored lotus in the hope that he could shatter its defense. There was no doubt that the outcome was disappointing for him, as the seven-colored soul-warming lotus was so impregnable that even a territory lord like him couldn't hope to destroy it. Shrieks were heard reverberating across this special space, each one representing the demise of a feudal lord's consciousness. He Yuan felt his heart sinking. When the last feudal lord's consciousness died, Yang Kai slowly turned around. While standing on the seven-colored soul-warming lotus, he stared dispassionately at He Yuan's consciousness. The tide of spiritual energy swirled around Yang Kai like a violent storm. "You're the only one left, He Yuan. Are you ready to die?" Yang Kai stepped towards his enemy, the seven-colored soul-warming lotus following closely. He Yuan roared, "You'll pay for underestimating me." Despite the ferocity in his tone, it was apparent that he was just acting tough. Just now, he had joined forces with more than 30 feudal lords, but they still couldn't hurt Yang Kai at all. Instead, they were the ones that were wiped out. More than 30 feudal lords had died, and he was the only one left now, so how was he supposed to be a match for Yang Kai? The only thing he could do was to stall for time so that the team he had sent could capture Yang Kai. After a sneer, Yang Kai said, "Let's see how you're going to make me pay then." Upon finishing his words, he drove the soul-warming lotus to charge towards He Yuan. A flustered He Yuan promptly ran away. While relentlessly chasing after him, Yang Kai mocked him by saying, "Didn't you say you'll make me pay the price? Is this how you do it? It's an eye-opener for me, Sir He Yuan." He Yuan was thoroughly ashamed and had the urge to stop in his tracks and fight it out with Yang Kai, but he didn't have the courage to do so. His consciousness was already wounded after the exchanges of moves with Yang Kai. If his injuries were exacerbated, he would have to get into a black ink nest and recuperate for a long time. Therefore, he did his best to avoid fighting with Yang Kai so that he wouldn't get hurt. Yang Kai wasn't a fool, so he soon realized what the other man was trying to achieve. "Are you stalling for time?" Certainly, He Yuan wouldn't respond to him, but his silence only confirmed Yang Kai's speculations. After giving it a thought, he figured out the other man's plan. "If I'm not mistaken, there should be some black ink clansmen coming to capture me. Am I right?" He Yuan finally responded, saying, "You can't flee. Surrender without a fight now." Yang Kai sneered, "We'll talk if you can survive." Left with no choice, he had to exchange moves with Yang Kai several times, which resulted in his aura weakening even further. On the other hand, with the protection of the soul-warming lotus, Yang Kai became increasingly ferocious, abandoning all semblance of defense and only attacking. His consciousness was badly wounded. It would take him several hundred years to heal this kind of injury. If he clashed with Yang Kai again, his consciousness would be destroyed, just like what happened to the feudal lords. Despite his unwillingness, there was nothing else he could do. He had paid a huge price, losing more than 30 feudal lords and suffering horrible injuries himself. However, he still hadn't managed to capture one seventh-order human like Yang Kai. This was the biggest humiliation in his life. Nevertheless, things had come to such a point where he could no longer turn things around. If He Yuan still didn't give up, he would be killed by Yang Kai before the team of feudal lords he sent could capture him. Therefore, at the last moment, he promptly decided to escape. Just as Yang Kai dashed forward with his violent tide of spiritual energy, he realized that He Yuan was nowhere in sight. At the same time, this special space, which had been locked since his arrival, was reopened. He ran away. Yang Kai ground his teeth, thinking that it was such a shame. If he could keep fighting with He Yuan, he had the confidence to kill the latter's consciousness. Unfortunately, He Yuan was the one who could decide whether he would open up the space, and he didn't give Yang Kai a chance to kill him. Killing a territory lord would be a huge contribution. By doing so, not only could it significantly weaken the Black Ink clan's power, but it could also reduce the possible casualties of the human soldiers on the battlefield. Although Yang Kai had killed a territory lord before, he had joined forces with Bai Yi at that time to do so, and Zhu Feng, the territory lord in question, was already badly injured. Despite that, it had still been a perilous situation. In the end, Yang Kai managed to deal a lethal blow to Zhu Feng only by resorting to his dragon bead. The chance to fight with He Yuan this time was rare, and it was impossible to have such a chance again. However, even though He Yuan had fled, it wasn't like Yang Kai had achieved nothing. When he was dealing with He Yuan just now, he managed to ascertain his whereabouts. If he raced after him now, he might be able to kill him. Therefore, the instant Yang Kai realized that He Yuan had fled, he quickly retracted his consciousness and dashed out of the feudal lord's black ink nest. It was silent all around him with no black ink clansmen in sight, so he turned to look in a particular direction and shot into the sky. As space principles undulated, Yang Kai charged forward swiftly. About an hour later, he saw a group of black ink clansmen rushing over in his direction. What surprised him was that this team was entirely composed of feudal lords, about a dozen in total. This was obviously unusual. The strongest black ink clansmen had left to deal with the human army from Inyang Pass, and although there were still a lot who stayed back, and Yang Kai had come across many of them recently, it was the first time he saw a group that consisted of only feudal lords. This powerful team was obviously tasked with capturing Yang Kai. Was this the arrangement He Yuan had made? When Yang Kai was dealing with He Yuan earlier, these feudal lords must have been heading in his direction. Unfortunately, they came too late as the battle in the special space had ended long ago. They were still on their way when Yang Kai happened to run into them. It seemed that He Yuan was really located in that direction. While Yang Kai had discovered the team of feudal lords, the other party had certainly seen him as well. These feudal lords, who were moving at full speed, were flabbergasted as they stopped in their tracks and got ready to fight. However, this human's consciousness was supposed to be trapped inside the Black Ink Nest's network, and they just had to go over and capture his body. So why was he here? Had He Yuan failed in his attempt to injure this human in that special space? Before these feudal lords could figure it out, Yang Kai was seen turning into a ray of light and charging towards them. Before he even arrived, his spear turned into countless shadows. The instant both parties clashed, the feudal lords exclaimed and grunted, feeling that the violent force had torn their defenses apart. In an instant, they were all blown backwards. Yang Kai directly moved past them and left this place without turning his head, soon disappearing from sight. The place was in a mess as black blood and black ink strength scattered everywhere. The feudal lords looked around with horrified expressions. 3 of them were killed by Yang Kai in the blink of an eye, and the rest were injured. It seemed that this human was even more powerful than they had heard. The surviving feudal lords were glad that Yang Kai didn't intend to kill them. They had no idea why he was in a hurry, as he only attacked them once and left. Otherwise, all of them would have lost their lives. One of the feudal lords suddenly realized something. Is he after Sir He Yuan? When the feudal lords heard that, a myriad of expressions came over them. Even if that was true, there was nothing they could do. Now, they could only hope that He Yuan could capture that human. Otherwise, all the Black Ink clansmen in Mu Guang's royal domain would be humiliated. It only took Yang Kai another hour to rush over to a certain feudal lord's fief. The feudal lords guarding this fief were startled upon seeing Yang Kai, and before they could figure out what was going on, they were easily killed. When the only 2 feudal lords were dead, the other Black Ink clansmen in the fief certainly wouldn't be able to counterattack. Yang Kai directly barged into the Black Ink nest and searched around, but He Yuan was nowhere in sight. However, some of He Yuan's aura was left in the chamber inside the Black Ink nest, which suggested that he had been here not long ago. After dashing out of the Black Ink nest, Yang Kai caught a horrified high-rank Black Ink clansman by the throat and asked in a grim voice, "Where's He Yuan?" The high-rank Black Ink clansman breathed out a puff of black ink strength in an attempt to corrupt Yang Kai. But an unperturbed Yongkai simply exerted more force with his hand and broke the other party's neck. He then caught another black ink clansman and asked, "Where's He Yuan?" Having witnessed what happened just now, the black ink clansman replied in horror, "I have no idea where Sir He Yuan went. He left in a hurry just now." "In what direction did he head?" The black ink clansman quickly pointed in a particular direction. Yongkai tossed him away, and by the time the black ink clansman landed, he had lost his life. In the meantime, Yongkai shot into the sky and raced after He Yuan. Since He Yuan had fled, it suggested that he was badly injured, and he had speculated that Yongkai would come for him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have immediately run away after leaving the special space. Although Yongkai had promptly pursued, he was still too late. Even if Yongkai chased after He Yuan now, he might not be able to find him as the void was too vast. He also wouldn't have any solution if He Yuan was determined to hide. However, he wouldn't want to miss this rare chance. It would be best if he could kill He Yuan, but there was nothing he could do if he couldn't find him. One day later, Yongkai stopped in his tracks somewhere in the void. Although he had searched around a large area for the entire day, he still hadn't discovered He Yuan's whereabouts. He felt that it was such a shame. With that said, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing for him. Most of the Black Ink clansmen had left Mu Guang's royal domain to fight with the humans from Yinyang Pass, so there were not a lot of them left in this place. The territory lords who stayed back had to assist Mu Guang to deal with the old ancestor from Yinyang Pass, so they wouldn't have time to hunt Yongkai down. Previously, he had to put his guard up as He Yuan was relentlessly pursuing him. Now that He Yuan had gone into hiding though, no one else in Mu Guang's royal domain could restrain him. In other words, Yongkai could basically go anywhere in this royal domain. Given his mastery of the Tao of space, he wouldn't fall into danger as long as he was cautious enough. At the thought of this, he turned to look in a particular direction and grinned. Kong Chan's home territory was located in a dead universe world where there was a magnificent mid-rank black ink nest. Over the years, the black ink strength that had been emanating from the black ink nest had enveloped everything. There were over 1 million black ink clansmen living in this place, which was just as flourishing as He Yuan's territory. The strongest and most competent black ink clansmen had left with Kong Chan to intercept the human army. So although there were some feudal lords around, the rest of them were mostly high-rank and low-rank black ink clansmen. Over the past few days, a slight sense of tension could be felt among the black ink clansmen in Kong Chan's territory. Rumor had it that a human named Yongkai was on a killing spree in Mu Guang's royal domain. He had already destroyed 2 territory lord black ink nests, and his next target was Kong Chan's. Most of the black ink clansmen didn't believe this rumor. As far as they were concerned, even though the humans were strong and resilient, they couldn't resist the corruption of black ink strength. Therefore, they had been hiding in their great passes all these years. Faced with the black ink clan soldiers, they could only defend themselves. How was it possible that a single human had barged into the black ink clan's territory and even destroyed black ink nests belonging to the powerful territory lords? One day, though, a 30,000-meter-long creature, which was covered in scales and radiating a golden light, arrived at this place, wielding a giant spear in its claws. The horrifying pressure this creature exuded sent chills down the spines of these high-rank and low-rank black ink clansmen. The humongous creature descended from the sky and forcefully swept his spear across the territory lord's black ink nest. The black ink nest, which had stood in this place for tens of thousands of years, given birth to countless black ink clansmen, and provided a resting place for all the black ink clansmen who were born here, was cut in half with just one strike. As the black ink nest fell, black ink strength gushed out of it like a flood. The black ink clansmen in Kong Chan's territory were naturally flustered. The feudal lords promptly shot into the sky to repel the enemy. However, the black ink clansmen, who were much larger than ordinary humans, appeared as petite as ants in front of this behemoth. The terrifying creature didn't even spare these feudal lords a glance as he opened his mouth and spat out a horrifying flame. In an instant, many black ink clansmen were slaughtered. Kong Chan's territory was set ablaze, and countless black ink clansmen perished. The terrifying creature flitted across the sky, and wherever he went, he easily killed all the black ink clansmen within his reach. On top of that, he swept his claws across all the shops that were filled with resources. The moment his claws came into contact with the shops, they simply disappeared. Barely a cup of tea's time later, Kong Chan's territory was dyed with black blood. The Black Ink clansmen tried their best to resist by bombarding the creature with their attacks. Their attempt wasn't effective in the beginning, but soon, the creature grunted in pain as his blood scattered about. The battle didn't last for long. Only an incense stick of time had passed from when the terrifying creature appeared to when he was forced to retreat. Despite that, over 100,000 Black Ink clansmen had lost their lives and Kong Chan's territory had been destroyed. Innumerable amounts of resources and manpower were lost. What sent these Black Ink clansmen into despair, though, was that Kong Chan's Black Ink nest was thoroughly destroyed. Black Ink nests were the foundation of the Black Ink clan. It could be said that all the Black Ink clansmen living in this place were nurtured by this Black Ink nest. To them, Kong Chan's Black Ink nest was profoundly important to them, a symbol of their very lives. These Black Ink clansmen were furious as they vowed to get their revenge, but how were they supposed to look for the colossal creature? Furthermore, after the Territory Lord's Black Ink nest was destroyed, all the feudal Lord Black Ink nests in Kong Chan's territory died. The information network had been disabled, so their ability to coordinate their efforts was severely hampered. Meanwhile, Xianxia was hiding inside a Black Ink cloud and recuperating. In the past, he would be nervous when he recuperated as he was worried that He Yuan would find him. However, he didn't have to worry about that now. In the Black Ink nest space, he had severely injured He Yuan's soul. Just like him, He Yuan was probably hiding somewhere and recuperating, so he wouldn't dare to mess with Xianxia. He should be glad that Xianxia stopped trying to look for him. Without any territory lords around, Xianxia wasn't afraid of the other Black Ink clansmen given his current strength. In such a situation, his presence in the Black Ink clan was like a flood dragon plunging into an ocean or a tiger in the mountains. He was simply unstoppable. Several days later, Xianxia dashed out of the Black Ink cloud and headed straight in a particular direction. Although he ran into some Black Ink clansmen on his way, he easily killed them off as they were no match for him. Sometime later, he arrived at a new territory lord's territory. He had destroyed 3 mid-rank Black Ink nests already, so the Black Ink clansmen were obviously aware of his plans. Knowing that he had targeted the Black Ink nests belonging to the territory lords, the Black Ink clansmen resisted in an even more ferocious manner. The instant Xianxia assumed his Grand Dragon form, the feudal lords, who had been hiding, rushed out to deal with him. Upon seeing so many Black Ink feudal lords, Xianxia counted and realized there were over 100 of them. Despite being a Grand Dragon, Xianxia still felt apprehensive. He was indeed powerful and able to escape from a territory lord as he was no match for such a master. However, there was no way he could defeat 100 feudal lords in a frontal clash. Xianxia had no idea whose territory this was, but from the looks of it, he knew that all of the feudal lords who stayed behind had gathered together in this place to defend the territory lord's Black Ink nest. It was no wonder that when he arrived at a feudal lord Black Ink nest to ascertain the location of the territory lord's Black Ink nest earlier, he faced no organized resistance at all. That was because they were all waiting for him here. After a moment of hesitation, Xianxia still charged at the feudal lords, who apparently hadn't expected that he would be so unrelenting. Seeing that the 30,000-meter creature was coming at them with a gigantic spear, the feudal lords instinctively dodged. The Grand Dragon directly plowed through the feudal lord's lines, forcefully enduring the attacks that came at him. Dragon blood splashed everywhere and dragon scales were shattered and broken, while some unlucky feudal lords were instantly killed as they came into contact with Azure Dragon Spear. With that said, the casualties were insignificant compared to the total number of feudal lords in this place. Regardless, Xianxia just had to break through their blockade. Ignoring the attacks coming from behind, he directly struck the territory lord's Black Ink nest with his Azure Dragon Spear. After a long time of dealing with the Black Ink clan, Xianxia came to realize that the Black Ink nests were actually quite frail. Basically, the Black Ink nests were defenseless. Even if he was in his human form, he could easily destroy a Black Ink nest with one strike, not to mention in his Grand Dragon form with the Azure Dragon Spear in his claws. Therefore, Yongkai didn't need to get tangled up with these feudal lords. His target had always been to destroy the territory lord's black ink nest. As a grand dragon with the azure dragon spear, Yongkai's attack was unimaginably destructive. Following the strike, the black ink nest collapsed to the ground. Yongkai didn't even take another glance at it as he flew across the sky above the prosperous city and spat out dragon breath, instantly killing tens of thousands of weaker black ink clansmen. The 100 feudal lords were relentlessly pursuing him from behind as they continuously cast violent attacks at him in an attempt to take him down. Although Yongkai did his best to dodge the attacks, his figure was too massive, so almost all of them struck him, causing him to tremble and roar. Despite thinking that it was such a shame, he had achieved his main goal. Therefore, Yongkai did not hesitate to shoot into the sky and leave. The feudal lords were still chasing after him. However, after Yongkai returned to his human form, he manipulated space principles several times and easily shook off his pursuers. Since Yongkai was nowhere in sight, these feudal lords had no choice but to give up. They turned around and saw that the black ink nest was withering and could not be saved. Although they had caused some damage to the Grand Dragon, they didn't manage to make him stay behind and he had successfully fled in the end. Another territory lord black ink nest was destroyed and all of the black ink clansmen in Muguang's royal domain were alerted. No one knew when Yongkai would jump out of nowhere and make a move on another territory lord's black ink nest. More importantly, no one knew which territory lord black ink nest would be his next target. Based on this experience, though, they understood that even 100 feudal lords couldn't stop Yongkai from destroying a black ink nest. It wasn't that they were unable to defeat Yongkai, but that he could break through their formation and head straight to the black ink nest, though he would be injured in the process. Presently, the royal lord and several territory lords were dealing with the old ancestor from Inyang Pass while He Yuan had gone missing. The feudal lords couldn't find anyone who could take charge, leaving the entire royal domain leaderless and flustered. Now, the only thing the feudal lords could do was to gather together around their respective territory lords' black ink nests and wait. They had to prepare should Yongkai launch a surprise attack on them all of a sudden, and they could only hope that they could stop him or kill him on the spot eventually. Therefore, in Muguang's royal domain, every territory lord black ink nest now had over 100 feudal lords surrounding it. Through the territory lords black ink nests that hadn't been affected, they constantly exchanged information and reported on Yongkai's whereabouts. The territory lords' territories neighboring the black ink nest that Yongkai previously destroyed were the center of attention. They speculated that Yongkai's next target would be one of those territory lords' black ink nests. Therefore, countless weaker black ink clansmen were sent from these territory lords' territories to search for Yongkai. As time passed, Yongkai was still nowhere in sight though, and the pressure on the black ink clan intensified. Based on past experiences, Yongkai would go into hiding every time he destroyed a black ink nest. But when he reappeared, he would stir up a bloody storm. The black ink clan speculated that Yongkai was probably hiding somewhere to recuperate. After all, every time he appeared, he would be wounded. However, it wouldn't take him a long time to recover. The human named Yongkai seemed to have an incredible restorative ability. Regardless of how badly injured he was, he could always recover in 10 days to half a month. Based on the information they had gathered from the Black Ink disciples, this kind of restorative power must have something to do with his Dragon Clan bloodline. Dragon Clan members were known to be able to heal their wounds quickly. As expected, Yongkai reappeared half a month later. Just like the Black Ink clan had speculated, he appeared in a neighboring territory lord's territory of the Black Ink nest that he previously destroyed. Although over 100 feudal lords were already waiting there, and they had set up a restrictive spirit array with the help of the Black Ink disciples, they still couldn't ward off the 30,000-meter-long Grand Dragon. Just like what happened previously, the Grand Dragon destroyed the Black Ink nest and shattered the universe world it sat on. Although he was badly injured, he still managed to break through the siege and escape. Another territory lord's Black Ink nest was gone for good. This caused the Black Ink clansmen to be furious. The destruction of the Black Ink nests united all these Black Ink clansmen as the feudal lords swore that they would kill Yongkai for the humiliation he had inflicted upon them. The Black Ink clan intensified their search for Yongkai, which made it hard for him to recuperate in peace. Despite their best efforts, though, a mid-rank black ink nest would be destroyed by Xianxia every half a month. Faced with the ferocious Grand Dragon, these black ink clansmen didn't have a solution, as there were no powerful masters among them who could confront the enemy head-on. One day, when Xianxia transformed into a Grand Dragon and arrived at a territory lord's direct territory, he saw nearly 200 feudal lords charging towards him. After an intense battle, he managed to kill quite a number of them, but their defense line held, so he was unable to get close to the black ink nest. Faced with so many feudal lords, he wouldn't dare to be reckless. Otherwise, he would most likely be killed. Left with no choice, he fled for now. It had been about half a year since Xianxia destroyed the first territory lord's black ink nest. During this period of time, he had destroyed 10 territory lords' black ink nests. In the past, the feudal lords were unable to stave him off regardless of how hard they tried. But this time, they managed to force him to withdraw without achieving his goal. Seeing that the Grand Dragon turned around to flee, the feudal lords became high-spirited and cheered in ecstasy. Some of the bold feudal lords even chased after Xianxia, but they eventually lost track of him. Although the feudal lords were unable to make Xianxia stay, it was the first time they gained a victory against this opponent. With their hard work and perseverance, they saved a territory lord's black ink nest that Xianxia had targeted. This was a meaningful victory for all the black ink clansmen that was worth celebrating. Unlike how joyful the black ink clansmen were, Xianxia was extremely vexed. He had repeatedly made a move recently, and even though he had made a huge contribution by destroying quite a number of territory lord black ink nests and killing a lot of feudal lords, he came to the realization that, as time passed, he faced increasingly strong resistance. Furthermore, he found many of the feudal lords familiar. In other words, he had seen them before. His target was clear, which was to destroy territory lord black ink nests. Usually, a territory where a territory lord's black ink nest was located would have 100 or so feudal lords inhabiting it. Once he managed to destroy the nest, though, these feudal lords would head to the neighboring black ink nests to provide reinforcements. That was the reason he came across so many feudal lords on this day, and many of them looked familiar to him. It was apparent that he faced them before. In that case, as he destroyed more black ink nests, he would face stiffer resistance. Xianxia was unable to achieve his goal on this day as nearly 200 feudal lords went all out to protect the black ink nest. Although he had turned into a Grand Dragon, he was still unable to break through their defenses, and instead, he was terribly injured. It seemed that he had to stop this game at this point. If he still recklessly continued, an accident was likely to happen. Fortunately, he had already destroyed a lot of territory lord black ink nests, thus dealing a heavy blow to the Black Ink clan. He had also snatched vast amounts of resources from several territory lords' territories and killed countless Black Ink clansmen. Could be said that he had made a huge contribution. Despite his reluctance, Xianxia still decided to end his actions here. He believed that after the chaos he raised this time, the foundation of the Black Ink clan in Muguang's royal domain had been severely damaged. It would take them several hundred to 1,000 years to fully recover. The Black Ink clan must be extremely vexed that 10 territory lord black ink nests had been destroyed, which resulted in several dozen more feudal lord black ink nests withering as well. Since he had made up his mind, Xianxia found a remote place to recuperate in peace. It was destined that his journey back home wouldn't be smooth sailing, though. Other than the fact that he would run into a lot of Black Ink clansmen along the way, he would also have to deal with the Black Ink clan army besieging Inyang Pass. Several days later, Xianxia, who was recuperating, suddenly thought of something. He turned into a soul avatar and appeared in his small universe. This was a place with lush mountains and clear rivers. The 300 artifact refiners that Xianxia had kept inside his small universe were settled down here. In any case, other than recuperating in such a serene place, there was nothing else they could do. This was Xianxia's small universe, after all. If they activated their world forces as they pleased, it would cause a burden on Xianxia. They might even damage or contaminate Xianxia's small universe. With that in mind, they had been doing nothing recently, which was why they were quite bored. However, after such a long time, they still had no idea what was going on in the outside world, and Xianxia didn't seem to have the intention of releasing them. It was expected that Wuxia he and the others were worried about Yang Kai, and they wanted to ask him what was going on. Therefore, the moment Yang Kai's soul avatar appeared, they promptly surrounded him. "What's wrong, senior brothers?" Yang Kai asked. Wuxia, he said, "Junior brother Yang, haven't we returned to the inner sanctum?" Yang Kai shook his head. "Not yet. There's been an accident. We're still inside the Black Ink Clan's territory." "We're still in enemy territory?" Guanning was astounded. Wang Sibo asked with concern, "What kind of accident? Is there anything we can help you with?" Yang Kai shook his head. "The Black Ink Clan's territory is filled with black ink clouds and black ink strength, so it's best you stay here lest you become corrupted again. As for what accident occurred, it's no big deal. Recently, I've been destroying some black ink nests." Yang Kai briefly told them what he had been up to. It wasn't that he wanted to brag, but he understood that these artifact refiners were apprehensive as they had been staying in his small universe and unable to find out what was going on in the outside world. Therefore, he decided to tell them what he had done to let them know that it wasn't that he was unable to return to the inner sanctum. He just didn't want to go back without dealing a heavy blow to the Black Ink Clan first. Upon hearing that Yang Kai had single-handedly destroyed so many Territory Lord Black Ink nests and killed countless Black Ink clansmen, these artifact refiners were dumbfounded. They couldn't really believe what they had just heard. After all, Yang Kai was just a 7th-order Open Heaven Realm Master. Although most of the strongest Black Ink clansmen had left the royal domain, even an 8th-order division commander would be unable to pull off such a feat. However, they knew that it wasn't necessary for Yang Kai to lie to them. In other words, such things had really happened. Wuxia he and the others were astonished as admiration was written all over their faces. A moment later, Wuxia he came to his senses and asked, "Junior brother, you mean, after a Territory Lord's black ink nest is destroyed, all of the subnests that originated from that black ink nest will wither as well?" Yang Kai nodded. "That's right." Wuxia he quickly ran the numbers in his mind. A Territory Lord's black ink nest is connected to several dozen feudal Lord black ink nests. In other words, hundreds of feudal Lord black ink nests have been destroyed as a result. "I think so," all of them gasped. Wang Sibo said in a shaking voice, "You've also injured Heiyuan?" Yang Kai nodded. "He wanted to fight me using only our souls, but he had no idea that I possessed the soul-warming lotus. He basically found the wrong opponent. Unfortunately, even though I've managed to wound his soul, I have no idea where he is now. I've failed in my attempts to find him. Otherwise, I could seize this chance and end his life." "The soul-warming lotus," Wuxia he muttered under his breath. He had certainly heard of this supreme treasure before, but it never crossed his mind that such a valuable item was in Yang Kai's possession. With the soul-warming lotus protecting Yang Kai's soul, it was expected that Heiyuan would lose in such a contest. Anyway, the Black Ink Clan have suffered immense losses recently. However, the feudal lords who are still around have gathered together around the surviving Territory Lord Black Ink nests, so I'm no longer able to keep attacking. It's time we went home." Upon hearing that, Wuxia he nodded. "You'd better keep yourself safe, junior brother. You're just a 7th-order master now, but you've managed to make such a huge contribution. When you ascend to the 8th order in the future, you'll be a pillar of strength for the human race. You must prioritize your safety at all times." Yang Kai replied humbly, "Many thanks for your compliments, senior brother. How confident are you that you can kill Heiyuan if you find him?" Wang Sibo suddenly asked. After pondering on it for a moment, Yang Kai shook his head. "I have no idea. However, since Heiyuan's soul is damaged, he must be significantly weakened now. If I run into him, I'll stand a chance to end his life." "Why do you ask, senior brother Wang?" A hint of hesitation flashed through Wang Sibo's face. Realizing something, Yang Kai asked, "Do you have a way to locate Heiyuan?" Wang Sibo remained silent. Nevertheless, his silence meant that he definitely had a way to find Heiyuan. Yang Kai promptly said, "Senior brother Wang, if you have a solution, why don't you tell me about it? Although I've destroyed a lot of mid-rank black ink nests and severely damaged their foundation, black ink nests can still be hatched again. It will just take them some time and energy to nurture these black ink nests. However, it will be different if we have a chance to kill He Yuan, who is one of the top 5 territory lords serving Mu Guang. Killing He Yuan will deal much longer-lasting damage than destroying 10 territory lord Black Ink nests. His death will be a severe blow to the Black Ink clan. After a sigh, Wang Sibo said, I wouldn't dare to say that I can definitely find him, but I can give it a try. Yang Kai's eyes brightened. I'm all ears. Wang Sibo went on to say, He Yuan has a defensive artifact that was made by me. After giving it some thought, Yang Kai soon realized what the other man was talking about. That arm ring. Certainly, he was aware that there was an arm ring on He Yuan's right arm. After all, he had frequently come into contact with him. Although Yang Kai knew that it was an artifact made by a human artifact refiner, it never crossed his mind that it was crafted by Wang Sibo. As expected, Wang Sibo nodded. Indeed, it was an arm ring. Back then, He Yuan found me and told me to make a defensive artifact for him. Therefore, I specifically made the arm ring for him. Although the defensive artifact isn't very strong, it's not weak either. It might save his life at a critical moment. Since you've seen it before, it means that he's still wearing it. Yang Kai nodded. And it will be easy, then. Wang Sibo put on a smile. Junior brother, you're an artifact refiner yourself, so you know that we have a habit of leaving unique marks on the artifacts we make to show that they are our works. Certainly, Yang Kai was aware of this custom. Just like Wang Sibo had said, many artifact refiners had a habit of leaving their unique mark on the artifacts they refined. Of course, they wouldn't leave a mark on every artifact they crafted, only the special and unique ones. The reason artifact refiners did such a thing was that they wanted to make a name for themselves. On the other hand, an artifact with a unique mark of an artifact refining grandmaster would be costly. The marks could either be conspicuous or hidden. It was fully at the artifact refiner's discretion. In fact, Yang Kai had done such a thing as well. However, he didn't leave a unique mark but instead a kind of hidden restriction. He left such a restriction in every artifact he refined for the feudal lords. When he dealt with Xiagu, he activated the corresponding restrictions, disrupting the flow of energy in the artifacts on Xiagu's body, rendering them brittle and useless. That was how he managed to kill him with one strike back then. Therefore, he could easily understand what Wang Sibo was talking about at this moment. Did you leave a mark in that arm ring? Wang Sibo nodded. There was no doubt that the arm ring he made for He Yuan was valuable, which was why he left his unique mark on it. I can make something to trace that mark. Perhaps it will allow you to find He Yuan. However, if he's hiding in a sealed world or if he's too far away, it won't work. If He Yuan was hiding in a sealed wood, he couldn't be traced as the signal from the mark couldn't be traced across a world barrier. On the other hand, if he was too far away, they simply would be able to connect to the mark. With that said, it was worth giving it a try, and Yang Kai promptly said, In that case, please do what you can, Senior Brother Wang. It would be best if we can seize this chance to kill He Yuan, but if that's not possible, we can just return to the inner sanctum. Certainly, Wang Sibo wouldn't turn him down. However, he wasn't able to freely use his power in Yang Kai's small universe. Left with no choice, Yang Kai could only look for a safe place first. Fortunately, there were a lot of sealed worlds within the Black Ink clan's territory. While Yang Kai was raising chaos, he discovered a lot of hidden portals to sealed worlds, but he didn't have time to explore them. Hence, it wasn't hard for him to find a sealed world now. It only took him a day to locate a sealed world, and after opening the portal, he entered and let Wang Sibo out from his small universe. He had already prepared all the materials needed for artifact refining. It wasn't difficult to craft a tracker, but it would still most likely take Wang Sibo several days. Yang Kai thus released Wu Xinghe and the others so that they could protect Wang Sibo while he searched around the sealed world for any potential dangers. By doing so, he could explore this place as well. If there were any rare spirit herbs or profound spirit fruits, he could pick them. As he explored the sealed world, Yang Kai pondered on where He Yuan was hiding. Although Wang Sibo could craft a tracker, it wouldn't be useful if He Yuan was too far away. Therefore, Yang Kai had to speculate where He Yuan was so that they could make better use of the tracker. Since He Yuan's soul had been badly injured, he must be recuperating now. A black ink nest would be the best choice if a black ink clansman wanted to recuperate. As a territory lord, He Yuan certainly had to go into a territory lord rank black ink nest to properly heal. However, Yang Kai was causing a storm in Mu Guang's royal domain, targeting mid-rank black ink nests. Hence, He Yuan might not have the guts to enter one. If he was cornered by Yang Kai in a black ink nest, he would be in hot water. Hence, Yang Kai was 80% sure that He Yuan wasn't in any black ink nest. He believed that He Yuan would be hiding in a region where those territory lords' black ink nest had already been destroyed. That was because there were no longer black ink nests in such a place. Judging from what Yang Kai had been doing, he wouldn't revisit such a place. Thus, it would be considered a safe zone for He Yuan. He might even be hiding in his own territory to fool his opponent. A few days later, Yang Kai returned from the depths of the sealed world. There were no valuable items in this sealed world. He had picked a few herbs, but there were no profound in-spirit fruits. During this period of time, Wang Xibo had finished making the tracker. Seeing Yang Kai, he passed something that looked like a compass to him and explained, "With the help of this thing, you'll be able to detect the arm ring as long as it's within range. You should find He Yuan when you detect the arm ring's presence." "Got it." Yang Kai nodded. "Be cautious, junior brother. Although He Yuan has been weakened, he's still a territory lord. Run away if you can't defeat him," Wang Xibo said with concern. Yang Kai replied, "Don't worry, senior brother. I have to bring all of you back to the inner sanctum, so I won't take any big risks." After moving Wang Xibo and the others back inside his small universe, Yang Kai left the sealed world. Upon identifying the direction with the help of his universe chart, he headed straight towards He Yuan's territory. Yang Kai held the compass in his hand, and he would take a look at it from time to time. Nevertheless, it didn't react along the way. Whenever he ran into a group of black ink clansmen, he would directly kill them all. There wasn't even a single feudal lord among the black ink clansmen that he came across, so how were they supposed to stop him? It seemed that his speculation was right. All the feudal lords had headed to the neighboring mid-rank black ink nests to help and waited for Yang Kai to arrive. Therefore, there wasn't a single feudal lord among the black ink clansmen on patrol. Yang Kai went on a killing spree for the next 7 to 8 days before he arrived at He Yuan's territory. He headed straight to He Yuan's home territory, since he speculated that He Yuan was trying to deceive him by hiding in the least likely spot for him to look. This place also made sense for He Yuan though, as this was where his foundation was. If he wanted to recuperate without relying on a black ink nest, this place would be the best choice. However, when Yang Kai arrived at the universe fragment and took a look at the compass, he realized that there was no reaction. "Is He Yuan not here?" Yang Kai frowned. He certainly had trust in the thing Wang Xibo crafted. This compass wasn't a complicated artifact, and Wang Xibo was an artifact refining grandmaster. So the items he refined couldn't possibly be useless. Since the compass didn't react, it suggested that He Yuan wasn't here. It seemed that Yang Kai's speculation was wrong, so he was disappointed. Nevertheless, since he was already here, he wouldn't want to go back without achieving anything. As he took a glance at the shattered universe fragment, he activated the power of his dragon vein and roared. The next instant, he turned into a 30,000-meter-long dragon. Life hadn't been peaceful for the black ink clansmen living on this universe fragment. When the human named Yang Kai appeared as a grand dragon previously, not only did he destroy the mid-rank black ink nest and kill a lot of black ink clansmen, but he also shattered the universe fragment. As a result, the city was ruined, and a lot of the resources in the shops were stolen. There was originally a mid-rank black ink nest that continuously produced black ink strength here, which was the foundation that the black ink clansmen relied on to survive. Now that the black ink nest was destroyed, the black ink strength around the universe fragment became thinner and thinner. A long time had passed, but the injured black ink clansmen still hadn't managed to recover. It was imaginable that the remaining black ink strength would be gone for good in no time. When that happened, the situation here would only exacerbate. On the other hand, He Yuan was missing. Initially, there were still some feudal lords in this area, but they had left soon after. It seemed that they had headed out to protect other mid-rank black ink nests. The black ink clansmen living on the universe fragment were apprehensive about their future. Although some high-rank clansmen assured them that He Yuan wouldn't abandon them, and that he would get another black ink nest to rebuild their foundation, their efforts did little to assuage these fears. Just as the black ink clansmen on the universe fragment were lost in their own anxiety, they heard a dragon roar coming from the distance, and it sounded familiar. The black ink clansmen looked up and saw that there was a colossal grand dragon with a golden glow descending from the sky, shaking its head and flicking its tail as it swam towards them. Why is he here again? The black ink clansmen on the universe fragment were stunned. It was said that this grand dragon had been targeting territory lord rank black ink nests, but since the black ink nest in this place had been destroyed, why was he here now? Before they could figure out the reason, the grand dragon was upon them. Wherever he went, black ink clansmen would die. When Xianxia arrived at this place as a grand dragon previously, he faced resistance from a lot of feudal lords. However, this time, the most powerful opponents were just high-rank black ink clansmen. Faced with Xianxia's intense dragon pressure, these black ink clansmen were so terrified they ran away at first sight, not daring to clash with him. The grand dragon destroyed everything in sight as though there was no one else in this place. As he breathed out his dragon breath, the black ink clansmen screamed in terror and pain. When Xianxia left 2 hours later, the entire universe fragment was thoroughly shattered. Countless black ink clansmen had lost their lives during the carnage. It was estimated that over 100,000 black ink clansmen had perished. Although there wasn't a feudal lord among them, these high-rank and low-rank black ink clansmen were still part of the Black Ink Clan's foundation. Their deaths could potentially affect the Black Ink Clan's survival as a whole. What's more, all the resources in all the shops had been snatched up. Although Xianxia had previously looted several shops, he didn't obtain everything as he was in a hurry. This time he could pillage without any worries, so he picked the Black Ink Clan clean. The entire universe was shattered, and innumerable Black Ink clansmen had lost their lives. It could be said that He Yuan's home territory was thoroughly destroyed. This was probably the first territory lord territory to be completely wiped out by a human in history. Unfortunately, He Yuan wasn't here. He Yuan's soul had been damaged, so if Xianxia could find him here, he had the confidence to kill him. However, the void was expansive, so Xianxia wasn't even sure where to start looking for him. Nevertheless, there was nothing he could do at this point. It was time he returned to Inyang Pass. The Black Ink Clan's army was currently besieging the Great Pass, but Xianxia had no idea about the specifics over there. Since he had made up his mind, he headed straight towards Inyang Pass. As space principles flared, his figure flickered. There weren't any obstacles along the way. Perhaps the Black Ink clansmen were too terrified of him now, so they wouldn't dare to wander about. Half a day later, just as he was about to leave He Yuan's territory and enter another territory lord's domain, the compass in his hand shook a little all of a sudden. Although he didn't find He Yuan in his home territory, Xianxia still held out hope. Perhaps he might find a trace that would lead him to He Yuan on his way back. So he kept the compass made by Wang Sibo on his person the whole time. Hence, he was pleasantly surprised that it finally reacted. The vibration was weak. However, Xianxia was a 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Master, and he had been hoping to find He Yuan, so he had been paying close attention to the compass. Therefore, the moment the compass vibrated, he immediately noticed it. Xianxia abruptly stopped in his tracks and looked down, only to see that the pointer was slightly swaying as it pointed in a particular direction. His eyes brightened. Since the compass was reacting, it suggested that it had detected the arm ring's presence. He Yuan was always wearing the arm ring on his right arm, so wherever it was, He Yuan should be hiding there. The reason the pointer was swaying was that He Yuan was still far away. It was barely within the range where the compass could detect the arm ring, so it could only roughly point out a direction. That was enough though. Xianxia was ecstatic. He initially thought that he would miss the chance to kill He Yuan, so he was surprised at the turn of events. He immediately concealed his aura and charged in the direction that the compass had pointed. There was no doubt that He Yuan was recuperating. Although his soul had been injured, he was still a territory lord. Therefore, it wouldn't be easy to take him down. Yang Kai reckoned that his best hope was to launch a sneak attack on him. As he got closer, the pointer gradually stabilized and eventually stopped swaying. Half a day later, Yang Kai hid inside a black ink cloud and silently examined the universe fragment in front of him. The universe fragment was pretty huge as it was left behind from a shattered universe world. Such universe fragments were innumerable on the Black Ink battlefield, especially inside the Black Ink clan's territory. Many feudal lords and territory lords built their bases on such universe fragments. He Yuan's home territory was also built on a universe fragment. As Yang Kai observed this place, he realized that there were no Black Ink clansmen moving around on the universe fragment. He Yuan was nowhere in sight, nor could he detect his aura. However, the compass was pointing in this direction. In other words, He Yuan must be hiding in this universe fragment. After observing for a bit, he still couldn't find He Yuan. Yang Kai frowned and dashed out of the black ink cloud before charging towards the universe fragment. Since he had no idea where He Yuan was, he could only search for him. He did his best to conceal himself as he moved around the universe fragment like a ghost. Initially, Yang Kai was worried that his whereabouts would be exposed. After all, regardless of how well he could conceal his aura, He Yuan might detect his presence in such close proximity. However, after he searched around most of the universe fragment, there was still no reaction from He Yuan. It was only then that Yang Kai set his mind at ease. It seemed that He Yuan was indeed badly injured. When a Black Ink clansman was horribly injured, the best way to recuperate was to enter an unconscious state. In other words, He Yuan was probably hibernating somewhere on this universe fragment. That would allow Yang Kai to make a move with ease. However, after inspecting most of the places on the universe fragment, he still couldn't find He Yuan. Fortunately, there came a moment when a hint of Black Ink strength caught his attention. In the Black Ink clan's territory, Black Ink strength was practically omnipresent. Some of it had even formed into Black Ink clouds. Therefore, Yang Kai didn't pay attention to this wisp of Black Ink strength initially. It wasn't until he realized there was something off about this particular patch of Black Ink strength that he decided to examine it. A moment later, he noticed that the source of the Black Ink strength was inside the universe fragment. In other words, He Yuan was hiding within the universe fragment. It was no wonder that Yang Kai was unable to find him even after such a long time. With that thought in mind, he traced the Black Ink strength and soon found a cave that led to the depths of the universe fragment. As he held his breath, Yang Kai snuck into the cave and descended for quite some time. The deeper he went, the thicker the Black Ink strength was. This led him to believe that his judgment was right. There came a moment when he saw light at the other end of the cave. There was a huge empty space in the center of the universe fragment, and as he looked up, Yang Kai couldn't help but narrow his eyes. That was because there was a several dozen meter tall Black Ink nest in the center of this universe fragment. Just like the other Black Ink nests that Yang Kai had seen before, this one looked like a dark flower bud, and as it breathed, the entire Black Ink nest pulsated like a heart. He was surprised that there was a Black Ink nest in this place. One had to know that he had destroyed He Yuan's Black Ink nest, so supposedly, all the subnests bred from it should have withered by now. Why was there still a Black Ink nest here? The only possibility was that this Black Ink nest wasn't a subnest of He Yuan's Black Ink nest, nor was it a subnest of any of the mid-rank Black Ink nests Yang Kai had destroyed. This might even be another mid-rank Black Ink nest. Otherwise, it couldn't possibly have survived. However, its scale wasn't even comparable to the low-rank Black Ink nests. He Yuan must have hatched it in a hurry to help him recuperate, so he didn't have time to grow it yet. As Yang Kai looked down at the compass, the pointer was pointing at the Black Ink nest. Found you! Yang Kai stored the compass and examined the Black Ink nest in front of him. The entire Black Ink nest had been sealed up, so it was impossible for him to sneak inside without alerting He Yuan. Nevertheless, He Yuan still didn't react even though Yang Kai was in such close proximity. It seemed that he was really in a state of deep sleep. Yang Kai took a deep breath and reached out his hand, summoning the Azure Dragon spear into his grip. The next instant, he madly pushed the power of his small universe. As a golden crow cawed, a great sun leapt up from behind Yang Kai. Fixing the great sun at the tip of his spear, he hurled it towards the Black Ink nest. At the same time, space principles flared, turning the local space viscous, giving He Yuan no chance to flee. Under the great sun, the several dozen meter tall black ink nest was blown away. Right then, a roar with a hint of fury reverberated across the space. The next instant, a golden light dazzled Yang Kai's eyes as a ring-shaped light shield appeared and blocked his attack. It was the arm ring refined by Wang Sibo. Yang Kai long ago realized that the arm ring was a defensive artifact that He Yuan wore on his right arm. Although he had been sound asleep, he, as a territory lord, still instinctively reacted to the danger the moment Yang Kai launched the attack and the arm ring's shield was instantly activated. Wang Sibo was an artifact refining grandmaster, so the defensive artifact with his unique mark that he had personally refined certainly wouldn't be weak when it came to its defense. However, it wasn't enough to withstand Yang Kai's attack either. After all, he was significantly more powerful than an average 7th Order master. Furthermore, Golden Crow casts the sun was a divine manifestation, so ordinary secret techniques were not comparable to it. Under the great sun, the golden defense shattered and Yang Kai directly thrust his azure dragon spear towards He Yuan's chest. It was expected that He Yuan was in a terrible mood as he was faced with such an attack right after he awakened. As his power burst forth, he forcefully threw out his fist. In an instant, the ground cracked and rocks flew around. The universe fragment, which had been drifting around the void in silence over countless years, was subject to a violent clash, and in the next instant, it exploded into pieces. 2 figures shot out of it. While in midair, Yang Kai sprayed out a mouthful of blood, his face as pale as a sheet. He almost couldn't bear He Yuan's all-out attack. Some of his ribs were broken and his 5 viscera and 6 organs were throbbing. Just like what Wang Sibo had said, even though He Yuan had been weakened, he was still a territory lord. Yang Kai stabilized himself and lifted his gaze, only to see that He Yuan was looking furious. There was a hint of puzzlement behind his eyes, as it was apparent that he hadn't figured out what was going on yet. The arm ring on his right arm had turned dim with cracks all over it. Most of its spirituality had been lost. It was only thanks to this arm ring that blocked Yang Kai's Golden Crow casts the sun at the critical moment that his life was saved. Otherwise, he could have been killed by Yang Kai in that sneak attack. Even so, blood was still streaming from his chest at this moment as the blow had still hurt him. A short while later, He Yuan figured out what was going on. As he looked up and made out the person who launched a sneak attack on him, he said through clenched teeth, "It's you." Yang Kai spat out the blood in his mouth and sneered, "You're pretty lucky." It was thanks to the arm ring that Wang Sibo had made for He Yuan that Yang Kai could find He Yuan. Nevertheless, it was also because of the arm ring that his strike was rendered ineffective. His success and failure were all because of Wang Sibo. With that said, he had found He Yuan at the very least, and the battle had just started. "How did you know that I was here?" He Yuan was both surprised and shocked as he couldn't figure it out. The void was vast, and he was hiding inside an empty universe fragment to recuperate. How did Yang Kai discover him? One had to know that he randomly chose this place to settle down for the time being. No one else was aware of his whereabouts. Despite that, Yang Kai had still accurately located him and launched a sneak attack on him, which was inconceivable. "Is it hard to find you?" Yang Kai sneered as he wielded his spear. "I can smell the stench coming from your body even if we're billions of kilometers apart. So, don't even think about hiding from me. Wherever you are, I can find you and kill you." He Yuan's expression darkened. "Do you think you're capable of doing it? You'll soon find out if I'm capable or not." Yang Kai snorted, looking high-spirited as he pointed his spear at his opponent. "Don't even think about running away, as today, either you die or I perish. There is no third possibility. Run." He Yuan was so furious that he started laughing as his territory lord aura rose. Black ink strength swirled around his burly figure as he roared. "How dare a trivial ant like you challenge this lord? You court death." As his horrifying pressure burst forth, space started contorting. Under the influence of his fury, He Yuan's robust figure expanded and became even more intimidating. Standing in front of He Yuan, Yang Kai was so petite that it was as though he was really just an ant. In the next instant, A huge fist came at Yang Kai. Faced with such an imposing attack, Yang Kai had never been more solemn, because wherever the fist went, space would shatter apart. This showed how powerful a territory lord truly was, and the situation was quite unlike what Yang Kai had imagined. The damage to He Yuan's soul didn't seem to affect his strength at all. This reality surprised Yang Kai, but he didn't have time to ponder on it. Faced with He Yuan's punch, he didn't hesitate to cover himself in spear light and charge towards his opponent. As he infused his 7th Order Open Heaven Realm World Force into the Azure Dragon Spear, he was determined to pierce through whatever stood in front of him. As the violent forces clashed, Yang Kai felt an immense power sweeping across his figure. He almost lost grip of his spear as the force easily shattered all of his defenses, causing him to see stars as he was sent flying backwards while spraying out a mouthful of blood in midair. If not for the fact that he had the World Trees clone, his small universe would have turned upside down because of this one attack. Once a cultivator's small universe was shaken, his power would severely weaken. When that happened, his life or death would be controlled by his opponent. Despite the fact that Yang Kai's small universe was robust, he couldn't make up for the gap between their powers. A relentless He Yuan was determined to capture Yang Kai and charged forward, throwing out his fist again. Yang Kai raised his spear to intercept the attack, but his attempt was futile and he was sent flying away again. Hong hong hong. A violent force swept across the void with every attack that He Yuan launched. Despite being defiant, Yang Kai was powerless to counterattack, as though he was a mere sandbag. Barely a moment later, he was covered in blood, looking completely battered. Struck by He Yuan's fist again, Yang Kai flew out several hundred kilometers and crashed into a universe fragment and remained there, unmoving. He Yuan strode towards Yang Kai, and with every step he took, he crossed several dozen kilometers. It only took him a moment to reach Yang Kai, and as he looked down at him, he spoke in a voice so loud that it reverberated across the void. "Have you lost all hope, Ant? Don't worry. I won't kill you, for you are still useful to the Royal Lord. I initially had no idea where to look for you, but since you've delivered yourself right to me, I'll not let you go. Stop shamelessly boasting." Yang Kai sneered as he stood straight up without a warning, the blood on his face giving him a hideous look. "Do you seriously think I'm unable to fight back? I was just trying to ascertain the gap between our strengths." The calm expression on Yang Kai's face made He Yuan even more furious though, and he exerted more force with his grip, resulting in the sounds of bones cracking. He lifted Yang Kai and said grimly, "Have you ascertained the gap between us now?" Yang Kai let out a breath. And you're not as powerful as I thought. Now who is boasting shamelessly?" He Yuan growled. "You're in my grasp now. I can squeeze you to death if I feel like it." Yang Kai just grinned at him though, and in the next instant, an invisible force condensed into a spike and stabbed into He Yuan's forehead. An unsuspecting He Yuan felt that a stake had penetrated his head. He was instantly overwhelmed by excruciating pain, which caused him to flail and groan in agony. Yang Kai, who was right in front of him, gripped his spear and stabbed it into He Yuan's left eye, directly destroying it. Black ink strength and dark blood gushed out of the now empty eye socket and dyed Yang Kai black. He Yuan roared even louder as he staggered backwards. In excruciating pain, he instinctually tightened his grip in an attempt to kill Yang Kai. Certainly, Yang Kai wouldn't let that happen. As he roared, he transformed into a 30,000-meter-long gigantic creature and effortlessly broke free from He Yuan's grip. Yang Kai next directly struck He Yuan with his dragon tail and sent him flying away like an arrow. He Yuan only managed to stabilize himself with difficulty after flying across several thousand kilometers. As he covered his wounded eye with one hand, he sported a grim expression, dark blood streaming through the gaps between his fingers. Yang Kai had turned back into his human form, and with the Azure Dragon Spear in hand, he sauntered towards He Yuan. Although he still looked battered, he wasn't dispirited at all. Instead, he appeared condescending. As the human drew closer, He Yuan couldn't help but step backwards, his only remaining eye filled with horror. Yang Kai said impassively, Do you think you can intimidate me just by showing your strength? Such a display only proves how weak you are. I guess it's really hard to heal the damage in your soul. Am I right, Sir He Yuan? You knew from the start, He Yuan said through clenched teeth. Yang Kai snorted. Of course I knew. If I wasn't confident, I wouldn't have looked for you in the first place. This place will be your grave. Are you ready to die, He Yuan? Upon finishing his words, he lifted his spear and vanished into thin air. When he reappeared, he was already right in front of He Yuan. In an overbearing manner, Yang Kai thrust his azure dragon spear towards his enemy's other eye. A flustered He Yuan extended his fist in a hurry in an attempt to intercept this attack. But in that instant, Yang Kai pushed his spiritual energy again and launched another attack on He Yuan's soul. Instantly, He Yuan growled, feeling as though someone had stuck a knife into his head. The pain caused his figure to shudder. Just like Yang Kai had said, it wasn't easy to heal the damage to one's soul, and He Yuan's was badly injured during their previous confrontation in that special space. It was now a fatal weakness which Yang Kai could use against him. If he were at his peak, Yang Kai couldn't have easily attacked his soul. However, given the state he was in, He Yuan couldn't possibly fend off Yang Kai's attack on his soul. His injured soul was attacked once again, which caused his defense to slip, and Yang Kai easily bypassed it with his spear. At the critical moment, He Yuan tilted his head and saved his remaining eye from being gouged out. Although there was now a wound on his head, physically he was still fine. Just as Yang Kai was ready to push out his spear again, He Yuan swung his arm out and swept him away. The next moment he turned around and ran away at full speed. Yang Kai couldn't believe that his opponent had fled just like this. He had been targeting the damage in He Yuan's soul, so the latter was completely powerless to go against him. If He Yuan hadn't fled, he would be doomed. As Yang Kai stared at his opponent's back, he slightly lowered his head. No one can flee from me. Don't even dream about it. He Yuan. Saying so, he manipulated space principles. Instantly, He Yuan's movements became sluggish, as though he was stuck in a quagmire. But soon, a powerful force burst from his figure, which allowed him to struggle out of the constraint. Yang Kai frowned in surprise, for this was the first time he saw that someone able to break through his space principles restraint with such ease. However, He Yuan was still a territory lord while Yang Kai was just a seventh-order master, so the raw power difference between them was still quite large. It wasn't surprising that He Yuan could do this. Based on Yang Kai's observation, He Yuan was still able to fully utilize his strength as long as his soul wasn't attacked. But when his soul was targeted, his power would drop considerably. Initially, Yang Kai wanted to settle this issue quickly, but now it seemed that he had to act carefully. It would be terrible if He Yuan became desperate and went all out against him without caring for his own life. Yang Kai still remembered vividly that when he joined forces with Bai Yi to deal with the wounded Zhu Feng back then, they were almost killed despite the territory lord being terribly wounded. At the thought of this, Yang Kai chased after his opponent and shouted, "You can't run, He Yuan!" At the same time, he struck with his spear and manipulated space principles to restrict He Yuan's movements. Noticing the danger coming from behind, He Yuan turned around and roared before pushing out his fist. A well-prepared Yang Kai used the same trick by sending out a spiritual energy attack. Instantly, He Yuan staggered, and his punch was significantly weakened. While enduring the attack, Yang Kai jabbed his spear into the side of He Yuan's belly and madly surged his world force. A hole was formed in He Yuan's abdomen as a result. The two of them traded injuries, and seeing how Yang Kai was forced back, He Yuan quickly turned around and fled. Soon, Yang Kai caught up though and repeated the process. Barely half a year ago, Yang Kai had been running away from He Yuan for such a long time that the world force in his small universe had almost dried up. Now, the prey had become the hunter. He was the one pursuing He Yuan. It seemed that He Yuan had run out of luck. He Yuan knew that he was unable to flee from Yang Kai as the latter was a master of the Tao of space. However, he didn't lose hope. Every time Yang Kai attacked him, he would be injured as well. As they kept wounding each other, He Yuan hoped that Yang Kai would be the one who could no longer persevere. Only then would he stand a chance to escape. Unfortunately for He Yuan, he wasn't aware that this was the situation Yang Kai had deliberately created. In fact, Yang Kai wasn't unable to dodge He Yuan's counterattacks at all. There were several times when he could have completely evaded such attacks, but he still chose to clash with He Yuan despite knowing that he would be wounded as well. Yang Kai wanted to give the prey in front of him the illusion that he could still survive and escape. Yang Kai's cultivation may not be as high as He Yuan's, but in terms of restorative abilities, He Yuan was far inferior to him. Trading injuries put Yang Kai at an advantage. He Yuan was destined to grow weaker over the course of this chase, and at the right time, perhaps He Yuan would die from exhaustion even without his intervention. Nonetheless, He Yuan was not an idiot. He might not know what Yang Kai was planning, but he was still trying his very best to escape from his pursuit. He repeatedly fled to the fiefs of a few feudal lords, hoping to use the Black Ink clansmen in those territories to stop Yang Kai. However, the remaining Black Ink clansmen in those feudal lord fiefs were basically just the low and high-rank clansmen with no feudal lords at all. How could they possibly stop Yang Kai? They might delay him for a few breaths, but it was impossible for He Yuan to completely escape. The chase continued across billions of kilometers, and He Yuan's injuries became more and more severe. He was riddled with wounds now, and not a single part of his body was left unbloodied. The fury and grievance boiling in his heart could not be expressed in words. He was far stronger than Yang Kai in terms of raw power, but Yang Kai kept deliberately targeting his heavily injured soul, rendering him unable to display the strength of a territory lord. Otherwise, why would he be in such a miserable condition? Several times, He Yuan had an urge to turn around and fight to the death with Yang Kai, but in the end, he didn't have the courage to do so. In his current state, he would not survive if he truly tried to fight to the death with Yang Kai. He wasn't even sure that he could take Yang Kai down with him at this point. His desire to survive pushed him to constantly flee, hoping for some miracle to happen which would help him overcome his current crisis. Suddenly, a variable indeed appeared. At some point, He Yuan suddenly felt a few familiar and powerful auras rapidly approaching him. Obviously, they were other territory lords, existences like him. He could even ascertain the identities of these people from the auras. He Yuan was overjoyed. Currently, most of the territory lords in Mu Guang's royal domain had basically led their respective armies to fight against the humans from Yinyang Pass. Only a few territory lords remained to guard critical areas like the royal city. However, He Yuan also knew that the territory lords in the royal city had been assisting the royal lord in besieging the human old ancestor. He Yuan had been recuperating recently, so he had no idea about the current situation of the battlefield. Since he could sense the auras of these territory lords appearing in the distance though, it meant that the battle between the old ancestor and the royal lord had come to an end. Regardless of what the final outcome of the battle was, these territory lords could provide some assistance at the front lines. And judging by the direction they were heading, it seemed that they were heading in that direction. Running into them here was truly a stroke of luck. He Yuan immediately flew in the direction of the territory lords without a moment of hesitation. So long as he met up with them, Yang Kai, who was chasing after him, would definitely have to act cautiously. He could even team up with the other territory lords and find a way to capture Yang Kai. With their help, even if Yang Kai was proficient in the Tao of space, he might not be able to escape. But right then, a petite figure appeared in his sight all of a sudden. He Yuan suddenly felt so cold. It was like he had been frozen solid. Yang Kai immediately became anxious. He had originally planned to slowly exhaust He Yuan to death as, no matter how weakened, the latter was still a territory lord. If he was forced into a corner, Yang Kai had no idea what kind of methods He Yuan could pull out in desperation. However, the sudden appearances of other territory lords had thrown his plans off entirely. He could sense Mieqiong and Qinglei among these auras, and apart from those two, he also sensed the aura of another unfamiliar territory lord. In other words, there were 3 territory lords up ahead. What are they doing here? According to the information Yang Kai had received, a few territory lords were assisting Mu Guang in besieging the old ancestor. That was why, when he had severely wounded He Yuan's soul, Yang Kai had been able to continue acting freely within the Black Ink clan's territory. After all, there was no other territory lord present to stop him. But now, 3 of them had appeared all of a sudden. Has the battle between the old ancestor and the royal lord ended? Who won? Yang Kai had no time to give it another thought though, as he only hesitated for a moment before immediately activating his space principles and disappearing like a ghost. The next moment he appeared, he was not too far behind He Yuan. He promptly manipulated the local space principles to seal the surrounding space and thrust out his Azure Dragon Spear. At the same time, he fired a blast of his spiritual energy straight at He Yuan's head while shouting, "He Yuan, suffer death." The 3 territory lords were still some distance away, so Yang Kai figured he still had enough time to escape after killing He Yuan. Yang Kai was already prepared to defend against He Yuan's final counterattack, but He Yuan appeared as if he was completely oblivious to the danger, even when this fearsome spear thrust was upon him. Rather, all his attention was focused on something in front of him. Suddenly, a glimmer of cold light flashed by as a petite figure, holding a long sword, flew past He Yuan. The long sword was devoid of even a stain of black blood and just so happened to collide with Yang Kai's spear. Yang Kai's eyes almost popped out of their sockets at the sight of this figure, and he frantically retracted his spear, but the powerful impact still caused his vitality to tumble in his chest. The petite figure rushed to Yang Kai and asked in surprise, "Why are you here?" Yang Kai was also stunned as he asked in a dumbfounded voice, "Old ancestor?" He had not expected to run into the Inyang Pass old ancestor here. Yang Kai had been wondering about the battle between the old ancestor and the royal lord when he felt the auras of Mietxiong and the other territory lords up ahead. Nonetheless, it never crossed his mind that the old ancestor would suddenly appear before him the next moment. Does this mean that the old ancestor was fighting Mu Guang for an entire half a year? Astonishing! However, now was obviously not the time to reminisce about such things. The 3 territory lords behind the old ancestor were relentlessly chasing after her and would be here soon. So, after the old ancestor finished asking, she mustered her world force, wrapped Yang Kai in it and shouted, "Let's get out of here first!" Yang Kai could only allow himself to be dragged along by the old ancestor, flying forward as fast as lightning. While escaping, he took a quick look back and saw He Yuan's huge body collapse into countless pieces all of a sudden. Apparently, in the brief moment the old ancestor passed him by, she had ruthlessly attacked him. He Yuan was already on his last legs and had no strength to take on an attack from an old ancestor. A load had been taken off Yang Kai's mind when he saw this. He Yuan might not have died at his hands, but in the end he didn't escape. "Didn't I tell you to meet up with the army? Why are you still here?" the old ancestor curiously asked as she led Yang Kai away. "You might be young, but your courage isn't small," the old ancestor indifferently stated. Who knows whether she was mocking him or praising him. She then suddenly asked, "Were you the one who injured that guy?" "He Yuan." Yang Kai nodded. "Yes, it was me. No wonder he didn't have any strength to resist my attack." The old ancestor instantly understood. If he was at his peak, I might not have been able to kill him in my current state. Yang Kai was taken aback after hearing this, and immediately took a closer look at the old ancestor's face. "Are you injured?" The old ancestor gloomily nodded. "My injuries aren't light." But the next moment, she suddenly sneered. "Don't worry. That old hag's injuries are even worse. She's currently unconscious inside her black ink nest." Yang Kai's heart was shaken. He knew that the old hag she was referring to should be Mu Guang. Both of them had fought countless times since they had taken command of this war zone. So a deep blood feud had already been forged between the two. Both were supreme masters of their respective race, and they had always been on par with each other. Since the old ancestor had suffered heavy injuries, Mu Guang would not have fared any better either. Otherwise, not just these territory lords would be chasing after the old ancestor. Just now, Yang Kai had been wondering why someone like the old ancestor was even being chased by a few territory lords, but now he knew the answer. Apparently, her injuries were quite serious. However, there was one thing that piqued Yang Kai's curiosity. "Old ancestor, Those territory lords don't seem to be injured at all. The old ancestor pursed her lips in disdain. These cowards were just hovering around in the background while I was fighting with that old hag. They didn't dare to interfere, so why would they be injured? However, when I broke through the encirclement, I killed one of them. Otherwise, the ones chasing after me would have been 4 territory lords. Heh, I'm pretty awesome, aren't I? Saying so, she even winked at Yang Kai. At that moment, Yang Kai couldn't remain calm and the corners of his mouth twitched as he praised. Old ancestor is truly too amazing and awesome. Your might is simply boundless. The old ancestor seemed to be quite happy to hear the praise, no matter how obviously forced it was. Quickly composing herself, though, she asked, I'm quite curious. How did you injure a territory lord to the point you could chase him down? You're only in the 7th order, right? If all the 7th order Open Heaven Realm Masters were so powerful, the Black Ink clan would have long been wiped out. Yang Kai explained. He Yuan dug his own grave. Afterwards, he briefly explained what he had done so far and how He Yuan had worked together with many others to set up a trap, waiting for Yang Kai to fall into it. In the end, He Yuan only lifted a rock just to drop it on his own foot. He failed to do anything to Yang Kai's consciousness in that strange space and instead was badly wounded. With the help of the compass refined by Wang Sibo, Yang Kai coincidentally found He Yuan's location and engaged in a fierce battle with him before pursuing him. The old ancestor's eyes lit up as she listened. Their black ink nests actually have such a connection? Did old ancestor really not know? The old ancestor explained, shaking her head. The human race actually knows very little about the Black Ink clan. Because of the Black Ink strength, we are unable to explore the depths of the Black Ink clan's territory, let alone their black ink nests. What's more, black ink nests are the foundation of the Black Ink clan, so they naturally do not reveal secrets about them. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have been able to obtain this intel at all. Having said so, a solemn look appeared on her face before she continued. According to what you said, each black ink nest can be counted as a subnest of a higher grade black ink nest. If a territory lord's black ink nest is destroyed, all of its subnest will wither as well. If that old hag's black ink nest were destroyed, wouldn't all of the territory lord black ink nests also wither, thereby affecting all the feudal lord black ink nests as well? Yang Kai agreed with a nod. That should be the case. The old ancestor asked again. Then whose nest bred the royal lord black ink nests? Yang Kai shook his head. I don't know either. According to the Black Ink clan, a royal lord black ink nest is the highest grade black ink nest. The old ancestor remained silent for a long time before finally adding, there must be a source. If we can find this source, perhaps we can eliminate the Black Ink clan once and for all. Yang Kai asked worriedly, if that's the case, doesn't it mean there's an even stronger Black Ink clansman, stronger than even the royal lords? Since that source could give birth to a high-rank Black Ink nest owned by a royal lord, it would naturally be guarded by an even stronger Black Ink clansman. That was quite a terrifying prospect. The royal lords were already on par with the old ancestors. If there really was someone even stronger, what kind of strength could they display? Perhaps. The old ancestor couldn't explain it either. Right now, our understanding of the Black Ink clan is still too limited. While speaking, she turned her head to look and saw that the 3 territory lords were still hot on their tails. More importantly, instead of opening up a gap, the distance between them had actually gotten shorter. A trace of murderous intent flashed across the old ancestor's eyes as she muttered, these 3 stalkers are a bit troublesome. I'm afraid we won't be able to escape unless we take care of them. Do you have any good ideas? Yang Kai decisively shook his head. I'm unable to take on a territory lord, but if it's just escaping, it shouldn't be a problem. That's my forte. The old ancestor glanced at him before realization dawned upon her. Right, you're proficient in the Tao of space. I forgot about that. But I want to kill them. Yang Kai promised upon hearing this. I'll help out however I can. The old ancestor nodded her acknowledgement as she stated, we'll act according to the situation. Don't force it. Yes. Yang Kai replied firmly. Right then, they spotted an average-sized universe fragment floating up ahead. Who knows how long it had been drifting through the void. In the cover of the universe fragment, the old ancestor turned around and landed straight on the universe fragment. The next moment, she thrust her long sword out repeatedly while forming a set of hand seals with her free hand. Xianxia couldn't understand what she was doing, but he knew that the old ancestor was probably setting up some kind of array or trap. She was done in the blink of an eye. Afterwards, the old ancestor bit her fingertip before flicking a drop of gemstone-like blood essence into the void. Immediately after doing this, she quickly concealed her aura. Xianxia understood the gist of what she was planning and hurriedly concealed his aura as well. Of course, since his cultivation was lacking compared to the old ancestors, his concealment wasn't as effective. Although the old ancestor was standing in front of him right now, if one didn't use their naked eyes to observe her, they wouldn't be able to perceive her at all. This showed just how exquisite her concealing technique was. Of course, this also had to do with her fantastic strength. Just as she was finished, the three pursuing territory lords flew across the universe fragment. They failed to spot the old ancestor ahead. However, they seemed to have noticed the universe fragment from the corner of their eyes and felt that there was something strange about it. Meticulously, who was leading the group, turned his head. The next moment, he saw the old ancestor dressed in white standing alone on the universe fragment with her sword pointed at them with a solemn expression on her face. Meticulously's hair stood on end. He might not have any idea as to what the old ancestor was planning, but judging by her posture, he could tell that it was not anything good for them. At the same time, Qinglei and the other territory lord whom Xianxia didn't recognize also noticed this peculiarity. The three territory lords had never imagined that the human race's old ancestor, who they had been chasing all this time, would actually stop here and ambush them. They had thought that the old ancestor was too seriously injured and unable to contend with the three of them, which was why they had chased after her so aggressively. All along the way, the three territory lords had been fantasizing about killing an old ancestor. After all, the death of such a powerhouse was a rare opportunity. They would have made an enormous contribution to the war if they really did kill her. It wasn't until this moment that the three territory lords realized that things were different from what they had imagined. The human old ancestor wasn't completely powerless. Before they could react, a torrential world force erupted from the old ancestor as she swung her sword. The universe fragment exploded and was reduced to dust as a giant yin-yang fish pattern appeared in the void, enveloping the three territory lords. The yin-yang fish was filled with endless murderous intent and, as it rotated, it seemed to transform into a giant millstone that crushed everything in its range. The three territory lords who were enveloped by it immediately began to bleed profusely as they howled in pain and anguish. Immediately after, a surge of black ink strength erupted from the territory lords. Naturally, they wouldn't just sit back and wait for death. Each of them released a powerful burst of energy in an attempt to break free. While they were struggling, though, the old ancestor arrived before the three territory lords with her sword in hand. No one saw when she had attacked, not even Xianxia, who was standing right next to her. It wasn't until a cold light flashed in front of the territory lord Xianxia didn't recognize and his giant head flew up into the void that Xianxia came to his senses. The old ancestor had decapitated a territory lord with one swing of her blade. The old ancestor had already made her move, so how could Xianxia stand idly by? His figure instantly teleported in front of Meticulously and attacked. At this moment, Meticulously was preoccupied with resisting the grinding force of the yin-yang fish, and his entire body was covered in blood as his aura had greatly weakened in this short span. When Xianxia attacked Meticulously with his spear, the latter was unable to react and was stabbed through the chest by the azure dragon spear. Although this injury was not light, it wasn't enough to take his life. On the other hand, the old ancestor swung her sword towards Qinglei after killing the first territory lord. Qinglei wasn't weak though and managed to dodge the oncoming attack, preserving his life. Be that as it may, the sword light cut off one of his arms as a fountain of black blood spurted from his wound, causing him to stagger back, howling in pain. But his howl was abruptly cut off as the old ancestor slashed again. This time, Qinglei was unable to dodge and his huge body was split in two. At the same time Qinglei was killed, Yang Kai was also sent flying by Mietxiong's fist, breaking many of his bones. Yang Kai somehow managed to stabilize himself and grit his teeth as he madly mobilized space principles, wrapping himself in spear light as he shot towards his enemy. Mietxiong let out a furious roar and ruthlessly thrust out palm. As the palm and spear clashed, Yang Kai felt as if he was struck by lightning and he could see stars circling around his eyes. Right then, a look of horror flashed across Mietxiong's eyes. Yang Kai also spotted the old ancestor silently appearing behind Mietxiong like a ghost. Immediately after, she swung her sword, sending a shocking sword wave down at Mietxiong. When the brilliant sword wave disappeared, the frozen Mietxiong fell to pieces, literally, and scattered in all directions. Yang Kai stared ahead in a daze, his face covered in blood and filth. Dead. 3 territory lords had died in less than 10 breaths. He might have participated in the battle, but his contribution was minuscule. He had only been able to restrain Mietxiong for a moment and had even been struck hard by the latter's counterattack. It wasn't wrong to say that these 3 territory lords had all died at the hands of the old ancestor. The fearsome territory lords, against whom Yang Kai was completely helpless, were like common chickens in front of the old ancestor, unable to fight back or even resist, easily killed in an instant. Yang Kai got to witness the true strength of an old ancestor up close today. Be that as it may, he was greatly puzzled by the current situation before him and immediately turned to the old ancestor. The old ancestor put away her long sword and turned to him, worriedly asking after seeing his state, "How are your injuries?" Yang Kai lightly coughed before replying, shaking his head, "It's nothing serious. I can recover after a few days of rest. But old ancestor, I don't understand something." The old ancestor indifferently asked, "You want to know why I let them chase me since I could have killed them at any point I wished?" Yang Kai nodded his affirmation. The old ancestor replied, "Because I only had this much strength left. If I killed them before, I wouldn't have been able to return. But since I met you, I'll be relying on you to take me back." An earnest and serious expression took over Yang Kai's face. "I will not fail in the duty I have been entrusted with." The old ancestor suddenly clucked her tongue. "Damn it, I'm about to revert back into a child again." Yang Kai was confused. "Huh!" The moment he was finished speaking, the old ancestor suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood as her aura rapidly weakened like a deflating balloon. Only then did Yang Kai suddenly come to his senses. The old ancestor was wounded, and her injuries were not light either. Furthermore, the old ancestor began to shrink with the weakening of her aura. Originally, the old ancestor looked like a young woman in her early 20s, but under Yang Kai's dumbfounded gaze, this young woman seemed to regress into a 7- or 8-year-old kid in less than 20 breaths. Her white clothes also shrank along with her figure, sticking close to her body. Obviously, this was not an ordinary piece of clothing, but a specially refined artifact. Yang Kai's eyes almost popped out, looking at the little girl the old ancestor had transformed into. You! He was not just shocked by the old ancestor's transformation, but also by her little girl persona. It was the same little girl who had been pestering him in Inyang Pass marketplace. It was this little girl who had given him that ancient coin. When he first met the old ancestor, Yang Kai found her a bit familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen her before. Now he finally understood that the old ancestor's appearance was somewhat similar to that little girl's. He had never imagined that the old ancestor herself was that little girl. Suddenly, everything that Yang Kai had encountered back then which he failed to understand made sense to him. Previously, he had been wondering why the old ancestor of Inyang Pass hadn't summoned him or given him any instructions before sending him on such an important mission to infiltrate the depths of the Black Ink clan's territory and find the Black Ink disciple artifact refiners. It wasn't that the old ancestor hadn't summoned him, but rather that she had been at his side the whole time. The ancient coin's origins also made sense now. How could a little girl who wasn't even in the open heaven realm steal such a precious thing from the old ancestor? At the time, Yang Kai had assumed the old ancestor had given it to her, but now it seemed that was not the case. At this moment, Yang Kai couldn't sense any trace of cultivation from this little girl. She was like an ordinary mortal who had never cultivated before. If Yang Kai hadn't witnessed her transformation with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed that this person in front of him was actually the Inyang Pass old ancestor. What the hell? Yang Kai was more than a little confused. Don't just stand there gawking. Hurry up and run. Who knows when more Black Ink clansmen might arrive to investigate. The old ancestor's face was pale and a bit of blood was trickling from the corner of her lips. Her bright eyes had gone gray and lost their shine, and she looked extremely tired with her eyelids already starting to droop. Having prompted Yang Kai, her small body staggered forward. Yang Kai immediately reached out to support her. I'm a bit tired. The little girl rubbed her eyes with her white, small and chubby baby hand, yawning, hurry back to the pass, and be careful on the way. Saying so, she closed her eyes. Yang Kai called out to her twice but didn't receive any response. After he carefully examined the little girl in front of him, he found that she had really fallen asleep. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was left with no choice but to pick up the little girl by the waist and make a beeline towards Inyang Pass. He might not have played a big role in the last battle, but he was still injured by Mietxiong while he was holding him back. However, this kind of injury wasn't a big problem for Yang Kai. Even if he didn't take rest, he could still recover. He looked down at the little girl in his arms, who was curled up and sound asleep, and couldn't help noticing her extremely pale complexion. No one would have ever thought that such a small girl would be able to kill 3 territory lords in an instant. Her tiny body actually carried within it the apex strength of the human race. When Yang Kai first met her, he had only felt the aura of an Origin King realm cultivator from her. At that time, he could not help but wonder how such a little girl could exist in Inyang Pass. She had lied to him at the time, claiming to have been born in Inyang Pass, and Yang Kai believed her. But at this moment, Yang Kai could not even feel the slightest trace of a cultivator's aura from her. She was like an ordinary mortal now. Yang Kai had never encountered such a situation before, but he suspected that it had something to do with the old ancestor's secret art. Perhaps when she was seriously injured, she would return to her youth to recover. He tried to place the little girl in his arms into his small universe, but he found that he was unable to do so. Even if the old ancestor was showing no signs of cultivation right now, her 9th Order Open Heaven Realm Foundation was still present, so his small universe was unable to contain her. Since he couldn't put her in his small universe, he could only remain on guard and try to avoid any conflicts with the Black Ink clan along the way as he physically carried her. Furthermore, Yang Kai did not dare to use instantaneous movement unless absolutely necessary. Firstly, it would consume too much of his energy. It would have been extremely convenient for him to use instantaneous movement if he was alone, but bringing someone along with him would increase his consumption several times over. Secondly, the old ancestor's condition really was not good and Yang Kai had no idea if instantaneous movement would negatively affect her. Fortunately, Yang Kai's cultivation was not low and his speed was not slow. Even if he flew all the way back to Inyang Pass, it would only take him a month or 2. Along the way, Yang Kai avoided the scattered Black Ink clansmen and the journey remained uneventful for the time being. 3 days later, Yang Kai suddenly felt the small figure in his arms move. Looking down, he saw the old ancestor rubbing her eyes and slowly waking up. Yang Kai was overjoyed. Old ancestor, you're awake? The old ancestor's complexion was still pale, but it had improved compared to before, albeit only slightly. The old ancestor let out a muffled groan as she shifted into a more comfortable position in Yang Kai's embrace. Having done so, she indifferently asked, "Where are we?" Yang Kai replied, "We're still in the Black Ink clan's territory, about a month away from the Inyang Pass." So slow. The old ancestor looked displeased. Yang Kai suddenly felt a bit awkward. "Why don't you sleep a little longer? Perhaps we'll arrive the next time you wake up." The old ancestor deliberately widened her eyes, shaking her head. "I'm not tired. I'm not sleeping." Perhaps it was because it was uncomfortable in Yang Kai's arms. Her small body adjusted and changed to other positions a few times, but she was still not satisfied. Finally, she grabbed Yang Kai's arm, flipped her body over, and straddled his neck, finally stopping. Yang Kai suddenly felt uncomfortable. It wouldn't matter if a real 7 or 8-year-old little girl was riding on his shoulders. But the issue was that she wasn't a little girl. She was the old ancestor of Inyang Pass. The high and mighty old ancestor was riding on his shoulders like this, putting him in an awkward position. It would be quite embarrassing if someone from Inyang Pass saw this. The old ancestor, on the other hand, seemed quite happy. Her 2 little legs dangling over Yang Kai's chest rocked back and forth as she looked around with interest, as if she was enjoying the picturesque scenery. However, there was naturally no picturesque scenery in the Black Ink clan's hinterland. So after staring for a while, the old ancestor grew bored and patted Yang Kai's head. "I'm hungry." "Ah." Yang Kai thought he misheard her. "I'm hungry." The little girl bent over and shouted in Yang Kai's ear, "I want to eat some hot steamed stuffed buns." Yang Kai's eyes widened in shock. Where would I get steamed stuffed buns here? There were naturally no shops in this vast void. Yang Kai had a nagging feeling that the old ancestor's temperament had greatly changed after turning into a kid. "I don't care. I want to eat steamed stuffed buns. Right now, right this instant." The little girl kept shouting, throwing a tantrum like a real child. Yang Kai was just about to refuse her and say that he couldn't do anything, but he suddenly remembered that while other open heaven realm cultivators might not be able to accommodate this request, he was raising a large number of humans in his small universe. He could get whatever he wanted from them. Using his divine sense, he immediately found a steamed stuffed bun shop in a bustling city in his small universe. The next moment, a tray of steamed stuffed buns appeared with a flip of his hand before he handed it to her. "Take it." The little girl immediately smiled happily. She grabbed a steamed stuffed bun and took a bite, but the next moment, she suddenly spat it out as a furrow appeared on her brow. "Yuck. This tastes like poop. I want to eat delicious steamed stuffed buns." Yang Kai immediately had a huge headache. He suddenly understood why those 7th and 8th order open heaven realm masters in Inyang Pass didn't have the demeanor of masters in the marketplace, and why each and every one of them was extremely unscrupulous with their business dealings. The people of Inyang Pass had to work hard in order to serve an old ancestor like her. Oh. Yang Kai's small universe. Inside the main conference hall of 7 Stars Sect, a meeting of the higher-ups was taking place. Since the last time Yang Kai had borrowed the strength of the Emperor Realm Masters of 7 Stars Sect to kill Zhu Feng, they had gained some understanding of what was above the Emperor Realm. Yang Kai also taught them the method to condense their Dao seals and gave them some resources to cultivate with. Recently, the higher-ups of the 7 Stars Sect had been working hard to break through to the Open Heaven Realm, but their aptitudes came up short. Even if they managed to break through to the Open Heaven Realm in the future, their order would be extremely limited. They wouldn't be of much help in the Black Ink battlefield. Only Miao Fei Ping had a chance of reaching the 6th order. At this moment, the Emperor Realm Masters were discussing their own cultivation insights with the Sect Master, Shang Guanji, as the leader. Although Yang Kai had taught them the method to condense their Dao seal, they naturally had many questions as they had never come into contact with such things before. They wanted to ask Yang Kai for some advice, but their ancestor, Yang Kai, had always remained elusive. They were unable to find him, so left with no options, they could only try to learn by discussing with each other. Just as everyone in the hall was locked in a heated discussion though, Shang Guanji suddenly jolted as he stood up straight as an attentive look appeared on his face, apparently listening to something. His strange actions puzzled many of the higher-ups and they all focused their attention on him. After a short while, Shang Guanji bowed and solemnly stated, "This junior will obey." As soon as he said this, all of the Emperor Realm Masters present became excited. Elder Guan Qianxing even asking, "Sect Master? Does the ancestor have any instructions?" In the entire void world, the only person who could make Shang Guanji act so respectfully was the ancestor. As he had expected, Shang Guanji solemnly nodded his affirmation. "Just now, the ancestor issued a decree for my 7 Stars Sect to carry out." Guan Qianxing and the others stood up together, perking up their ears. Shang Guanji swept his eyes over the crowd and sonorously declared, "The ancestor wants to eat steamed stuffed buns." Everyone was dumbstruck. Guan Qianxing thought he had heard wrong and skeptically asked, "Sect Master, What does the ancestor want to do? Shang Guanji stared at him with a serious look on his face, reiterating, the ancestor wants to eat steamed stuffed buns. Delicious steamed stuffed buns. 7 Stars Sect's gears suddenly started fiercely turning as the Emperor Realm Masters flew about. The disciples below didn't know what was happening and thought that something big had happened. But soon they found out that one of the 7 Stars Sect's precious spirit beasts had been killed by Elder Guan Qianxing. The disciples were all shocked. It had to be known that Elder Guan Qianxing had spent a great deal of effort to capture this spirit beast in the past. It was quite strong and intelligent. Coupled with its beautiful appearance, many of the disciples were quite fond of it. Although it had a bad temper and would occasionally injure others, when this spirit beast was killed, many of the female disciples broke into tears. They felt that Elder Guan Qianxing was simply inhumane. How could he kill such a beautiful spirit beast? Rather than calling him Guan Qianxing, we should just call him Butcher Guan. The disciples didn't know why the spirit beast was killed, but the elders did. The ancestor wanted to eat steamed stuffed buns. Delicious steamed stuffed buns. They didn't know what kind of steamed stuffed buns the ancestor would find delicious, so they could only try their best by using the top materials they could find. The entire 7 Stars sect had been mobilized, especially the disciples who were proficient in cooking. In less than 2 hours, all kinds of steamed stuffed buns were served. As soon as the steamer was opened, a basket of steamed stuffed buns strangely disappeared. In the void, a profusely sweating Yang Kai handed the freshly baked steamed stuffed buns to the old ancestor. Try this. The old ancestor took it and sniffed before gingerly taking a bite. It's acceptable. Yang Kai let out a long sigh. The 1 hour before the steamed stuffed buns were prepared was definitely the most torturous hour of his life. He wouldn't feel so tired even if he had to fight a territory lord one-on-one. The tantrum-throwing old ancestor was simply a nightmare to deal with. Fortunately, she had finally calmed down. Sitting on his shoulders, the old ancestor was happily eating. She picked up a steamed stuffed bun and pushed it to Yang Kai's mouth. You eat one too. Yang Kai said, I don't need it. Eat. The old ancestor simply stuffed it into his mouth after throwing a word. Yang Kai swallowed back his protests and obediently ate the bun. The few steamed stuffed buns were quickly consumed as the two ate them one after another. The old ancestor licked her little hand and casually muttered, I also want to eat candied fruits. Yang Kai immediately felt as if he had been struck by lightning as a troubled look took over his face. Old ancestor, please wait a moment. In 7 Stars sect, Shang Guanji stood up straight for a moment before suddenly turning to the elders who were staring at him and speaking. The ancestor wants to eat candied fruits. Ancestor wants to eat pancakes. Ancestor wants to drink tea. Ancestor wants. Almost every other day, a new decree would be issued, sending the entire 7 Stars sect into a flurry of activity. The sect master, Shang Guanji, was in charge of coordinating their response, leading the various Emperor Realm elders to work together. Every time a decree was issued, all of the sect's manpower would be mobilized, completing the request in the shortest time possible no matter what the ancestor demanded. After completing several of Ancestor's decrees, an Emperor Realm elder suddenly asked, Sect Master, what is the ancestor doing? Shang Guanji's expression turned solemn. How can we understand the ancestor's thoughts? Don't think too much about it. Meticulously completing every task is more important. The elder nodded repeatedly in agreement. Naturally, we can't fathom the ancestor's thoughts. It's just that, I think that the requests ancestor has raised aren't something he needs personally. Shang Guanji glanced at him, immersing deep into his thoughts. You mean? The elder continued, Sect Master. You must be aware that I became a grandfather a few years ago. My grandson is now 6 years old and is very playful and gluttonous. When I'm free, he makes all kinds of requests, similar to the decrees issued by the ancestor. If this old master may make a bold presumption, I think that the ancestor is doing the same thing as this old master coaxing a child. As soon as these words left his mouth, it resonated with many of the elders' hearts as a few even nodded in agreement. To be honest, many decrees had been passed down over the last few days, so everyone had been able to infer some things from them. Nonetheless, None of them had the courage to ask questions or make any assumptions until this elder boldly spoke. Shang Guanji raised his brow upon hearing this. Coaxing a child? You might be right, but does that mean the ancestor has an heir? This is joyous news, the elder replied. Of course, it's joyous news, but if he's really coaxing a child, we can be more proactive in supporting him. It's extremely hard to fathom a child's temperament, but as long as they are happy, they will become obedient. What plan do you have? Shang Guanji asked. The elder stroked his beard before replying. If it's regarding eating, we've already prepared a lot of snacks for the ancestor, so the direction we should be focusing now should be entertainment. To tell you the truth, my grandson is very fond of a certain toy, and he enjoys playing with it quite a lot. If we can give a similar object to the ancestor, perhaps we can resolve the ancestor's predicament. Oh! Shang Guanji became interested. What is it? The elder stroked his beard with a smile before giving its name. Shang Guanji lightly nodded his acknowledgement. An interesting proposal. In that case, we should quickly make one and hand it over to the ancestor. The elder readily accepted the order. After the time it takes to boil a cup of tea, Yang Kai suddenly reached out as something appeared in his hand, handing it to the old ancestor on his neck. Here, this is for you. The old ancestor glanced at it before smacking Yang Kai's head and angrily asking, Do you think I'm a child? Yang Kai's neck shrank back. Be that as it may, the old ancestor took the object in his hand with a light snort before she started shaking it in satisfaction. It was a rattle drum. After they gifted Yang Kai the rattle drum that day, the frequency with which the ancestor issued new decrees greatly decreased. Although they still needed to prepare some food from time to time, it was not as frequent as before. After the initial hustle and bustle, 7 Stars sect was able to quickly and effectively complete the ancestor's orders. The ancestor was obviously very satisfied with their performance, even bestowing them with some materials and many insights about condensing their Dao seals. The 7 Stars sect's higher-ups were naturally very grateful. A month passed in the blink of an eye. After traveling non-stop, Yang Kai was already close to Inyang Pass. He didn't run into many Black Ink clansmen on the way, so the journey was quite smooth and uneventful. On this day, Yang Kai saw the towering Inyang Pass from afar, but just as he had expected, it was surrounded by the Black Ink clan's army. It had been over half a year since the Black Ink clan's army had engaged Inyang Pass army. During this time, both sides must have clashed on quite a few occasions already. When Yang Kai arrived, both sides were in a heightened state of tension, but not much fighting was happening. This also made sense. Every time the Black Ink clan army besieged a great pass, the battle would last for an extremely long time, ranging from a decade or two to a century. During this time, the Black Ink clan army would constantly replenish their own forces until their casualties were too many for them to bear. When the Black Ink clan army retreated, the humans would finally have some precious time to rest and recover. Inyang Pass was right ahead, and if Yang Kai was alone, he could have used the universe transference law to return directly. Every great pass had 4 purifying Black Ink battleships, and all of them had a universe array that Yang Kai had personally installed, so it was only natural that he had left his imprint on them. But as he also had the old ancestor with him, he was unable to use the universe transference law. The old ancestor's cultivation had been completely exhausted, so if she were to encounter any danger, she would be powerless to defend herself. If he wanted to return to the inner sanctum, he would have to plan his every step very carefully. The old ancestor, on the other hand, seemed to want nothing more than to see the world plunge into chaos. She urged Yang Kai to press on. According to her, if Yang Kai were to appear, the soldiers of Inyang Pass would definitely come to support him. At that time, they might find a chance to safely return to the inner sanctum by working together, especially since Yang Kai was proficient in the Tao of space. Yang Kai decisively refused the old ancestor's proposal. The child version of the old ancestor was too reckless. Although her proposal did have a chance of success, it carried a huge risk. As it concerned the safety of the old ancestor, Yang Kai didn't dare to be careless. Then, what do you suggest we do? Having her proposal rejected, the old ancestor was obviously upset. Let's wait. It's impossible for the two sides to continue staring at each other peacefully. When the fighting really starts, we'll find a place with weak defenses and break through. It was not the first time Yang Kai had done something like this, but the last time he did it, he had hundreds of others accompanying him. This time, he could only rely on himself. Having made his decision, Yang Kai immediately found a universe fragment and settled down. This universe fragment wasn't very big, and there were traces of mining on it. Possibly, Inyang Pass had used void Inyang mirrors to transport a universe world back here, mined it, and then discarded the leftovers. The Black Ink clan probably didn't expect any humans to stop over in such a place, so they did not have any intention of investigating it. For the next few days, although the two races clashed with each other, it was only some small skirmishes, nothing too big. Yang Kai patiently waited. Finally, after half a month, Yang Kai, who was cultivating, suddenly felt powerful energy fluctuations coming from the direction of Inyang Pass. When he looked up, he saw the Black Ink clan army attacking Inyang Pass in a frenzy. The entire battlefield was shrouded in rich black ink strength, and he could see countless black ink clouds of all sizes spanning over the entire battlefield. This was his chance. Yang Kai stood up and started paying close attention to the battle. The old ancestor also climbed onto his shoulder and sat down in her special seat, staring at the battle with widened eyes. Facing the frenzied attacks of the Black Ink clan, the humans basically left everything to Inyang Pass' strong defenses. So long as Inyang Pass remained standing, the Black Ink clan was basically unable to do anything to the human race. All of their attacks were just a waste of energy. On the other hand, the spirit arrays and artifacts set up around Inyang Pass could effectively kill the incoming Black Ink clan. This assault lasted for 3 full days before the Black Ink clan's momentum weakened all of a sudden. At that moment, warships suddenly appeared from the gates of Inyang Pass one by one. Immediately after, figures charged straight at them one after another, attacking them. The soldiers of the two races were instantly locked into another heated confrontation on this massive battlefield. Countless Black Ink clansmen instantly lost their lives, whereas many human race warships were reduced to shambles. "Let's go!" Yang Kai shouted and rushed towards Inyang Pass. Riding on his shoulders, the old ancestor tightly gripped his hair with one hand, while pointing ahead with the other, looking all excited as she shouted, "Charge!" In the chaotic battlefield, no one on either side noticed a pair of figures charging towards them from the rear, until a dragon roar reverberated across the battlefield and a golden glow flashed, followed by the majestic appearance of a 30,000-meter-long dragon. There was a giant spear no smaller than its body in one of the Grand Dragon's claws, and the moment it appeared, it swept the spear out along the battlefield, cleaving through the unsuspecting Black Ink clansmen just like a violent gust of wind sweeping away fallen leaves. The Black Ink clan suffered massive casualties in the blink of an eye, and when the Grand Dragon whipped its tail, countless more perished. On such a battlefield, the destruction a Grand Dragon could cause was simply unimaginable, not to mention the long spear held in its dragon claw. Many of the Black Ink clansmen turned pale in fright and tried to dodge, but it was still difficult for them to avoid the oncoming death. Soon, the appearance of the Grand Dragon attracted the attention of both sides. The masters of both races quickly converged. One side wanted to intercept the dragon, while the other wanted to rescue it, which naturally resulted in a fierce clash. The resulting battle shook the universe and caused the void to collapse. The old ancestor's small figure stood atop Yang Kai's dragon head, rocking along the Grand Dragon's movements. She was surrounded by intense murderous intents, storming from every possible direction, but she still remained steadfast. Suddenly, a burly figure broke through the rows and rows of enemies and landed on the dragon head, bowing and cupping his fist. "Welcome back, old ancestor." The old ancestor lightly nodded. "You've worked hard." The person who had arrived was none other than the Southern Army commander, Wu Qing. In the entire Inyang Pass, he was the strongest open heaven realm master besides the old ancestor. He also possessed one of the 4 universe pillars and was a future hope of the human race, as rumor had it that he was not far from advancing to the 9th Order. If he could really break through to the 9th Order one day, the human race would have another old ancestor. Along with Wu Qing's arrival, Many open heaven realm masters soon gathered around the Grand Dragon. Even a few 8th Order division commanders had arrived, escorted by numerous warships. Surrounded by the elites of the human race, Yang Kai and the Old Ancestor were escorted back to Inyang Pass. The Black Ink clan had obviously also discovered the situation here. Although they didn't quite understand why the humans were defending the Grand Dragon so heavily. Since the enemy was paying so much attention to it, it must be important. As such, the Black Ink clan rushed in, but no matter how many of them tried, they failed to block the humans' advance. A moment later, Yang Kai and the Old Ancestor were brought to one of Inyang Pass's main gates under Wu Qing's lead. Wu Qing summoned his strength and wrapped it around the Old Ancestor before quickly entering the inner sanctum, while Yang Kai turned around and joined up with the army to fight back against the Black Ink clan. This battle lasted for several days and, by the end, Yang Kai couldn't maintain his dragon form and had no choice but to fight in his human form. After a few days, both sides withdrew. The battlefield entered a rare brief period of peace. The armies on both sides focused on recuperating, but so long as the Black Ink clan did not retreat, Inyang Pass could not really rest. Fortunately, the Old Ancestor had returned. Although the Old Ancestor had been seriously injured once again and had inevitably returned to her younger self, the news she brought back greatly boosted the morale of Inyang Pass. Mu Guang was seriously wounded in her fight with the Old Ancestor and was currently sleeping in her Black Ink nest. In other words, Mu Guang would not appear in this battle. More importantly, the Old Ancestor had eliminated 5 territory lords. This was an unimaginable loss for the Black Ink clan. On top of that, Yang Kai had single-handedly destroyed almost 10 mid-rank Black Ink nests, along with hundreds of low-rank Black Ink nests. After such heavy losses, the Black Ink clan was in a state of chaos. A large number of feudal lords had gathered around the remaining mid-rank Black Ink nests to protect them and thus could not be deployed as reinforcements. Such casualties had shaken the foundation of the Black Ink clan. In the past, the reason why the Black Ink clan was able to besiege the Great Pass for so long was because they could constantly send reinforcements from the rear. But now that Yang Kai had dealt so much damage, the number of troops they could send would be greatly reduced. It could even be said that the Black Ink clan would not be sending many soldiers at all in order to guard against any future problems. In that case, the current war would end soon. Without reinforcements, how could the Black Ink clan resist the humans when they suffered so many casualties in battle? The Black Ink clan would have to retreat once the situation on the battlefield became untenable. Thus, after hearing this news, those from Inyang Pass were all extremely excited. What's more, Yang Kai had ventured deep into the Black Ink clan's territory alone, destroying many Black Ink nests, and rescued more than 300 artifact refiners, including 3 grandmasters. He had made an enormous contribution to the human race. Yang Kai had already let out Wu Xinghe and the others from his small universe, and they were now assigned to the refining hall to repair the warships damaged in the battle. Wu Xinghe and the others were originally 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters, but in order to assist Yang Kai, their cultivations had regressed to the 6th Order so that they could enter the latter's small universe. Be that as it may, it wasn't too big a deal. As long as they had a profound in-spirit fruit, they could slowly regain their original cultivation. The war between the two races was in full swing with several dozen small skirmishes breaking out between the two armies almost every day, with a big battle occurring every 10 to 15 days. Strictly speaking, this was Yang Kai's first time officially participating in a battle outside a Great Pass. Although he had participated in the battle at Blue Sky Pass last time, he had not been officially registered to Blue Sky Pass at the time. Likewise, he had been assisting in perfecting the purifying Black Ink battleships during the early stages of that war. When he finally managed to sneak out and participate in the fighting, it was not long before he coincidentally discovered the location of the Royal Lord, which ultimately resulted in a decisive battle breaking out. The Black Ink clan army had suffered heavy losses because of him, giving Blue Sky Pass the chance to capitalize on the situation. It was different this time. Without so many twists and coincidences, although the battle was still leaning in Inyang Pass' favor, they were still a long way from completely repelling the Black Ink clan. Fortunately, the Royal Lord was not present on the battlefield, so the Black Ink clan army seemed to be a bit sluggish either from lack of coordination or morale. Many territory lords simply lead their own armies to fight on their own, making it difficult to form an effective strategy. Those from Inyang Pass would often gain a great advantage on the battlefield using this weak point. The entire Inyang Pass had essentially transformed into a giant meat grinder. Every time a big battle broke out, the Black Ink clan would lose countless masters. Although the humans would also suffer heavy casualties, the losses were still within an acceptable range because of the protection of the warships. As Yang Kai was a soldier from Blue Sky Pass, he didn't have an official position here. However, Tang Qiu had decided to temporarily place him in Su Linggong's squad. As they fought, Yang Kai got to taste how truly cruel the battlefield was, though it was not like this was his first time on such a battlefield. When the great demon god had wreaked havoc in the star boundary, all the cultivators of the star boundary were pulled into the turmoil. That battle almost caused the star boundary to shatter and billions upon billions of lives were lost. In the end, the great emperor stepped forward and finally put an end to the great demon god's rampage. Be that as it may, Yang Kai always found it brutal, like it was the first time, no matter how many times he experienced this kind of battle. Yang Kai's addition to Su Linggong's squad had helped them slaughter countless enemies, earning them a massive amount of military merits in every battle they fought. After a long period of killing and fighting, every human came to possess a thick killing intent. Once this killing intent broke out on the battlefield, it would often deter the weaker Black Ink clansmen. Fighting, recuperating. The process was repeated over and over again. Yang Kai had almost lost track of time as all his focus was on making use of every opportunity he could find to either heal himself or kill his enemies. Every time he fought, he would always stand at the forefront, and every time he did so, his body would be covered in wounds. Nevertheless, as long as his injuries weren't fatal, no matter how serious they were, he would be able to recover in short order thanks to his dragon vein and wood element. His efforts had brought a significant boost in power and safety to Su Linggong's squad, and even after fighting for so long, they had not lost a single member. Furthermore, most of the time, no one would even be injured other than Yang Kai. Their squad was performing 10 times better than the other ordinary squads. Tang Qiu once came looking for him, taking time out of his busy schedule, and told him that he could return to Blue Sky Pass at any time he wished. Although he could be considered half a disciple of Inyang Cave Heaven, he was still formally a soldier of the Blue Sky Pass on this Black Ink battlefield. Inyang Pass had transferred him here mainly to gather information about the Black Ink clan's worship program and the artifact refiners who were behind it. Now that Yang Kai had completed this task perfectly, the battle at Inyang Pass technically had nothing to do with him. If Yang Kai wanted to leave, Inyang Pass naturally would not hold him back. Of course, Yang Kai had no intention of leaving. Compared to returning to Blue Sky Pass where he would have nothing to do but cultivate and retreat, he was more than willing to stay here and kill more Black Ink clansmen. Although the strength of a single person was meager, as long as everyone killed a few more, the Black Ink clan would be exterminated sooner. The battlefield fell into turmoil again. Surges of world force and Black Ink strength came and went as the human warships and Black Ink army fought each other. A large-scale battle had broken out once more, and the 4 armies of Inyang Pass charged to blunt the Black Ink clan's momentum. Yang Kai, Su Linggong, and another 7th Order Open Heaven Master, Ji Miaotong, wandered through the battlefield in a triangle formation. Ji Miaotong was the vice squad leader of Su Linggong's squad and a woman. Yang Kai had met her when he was escorted by Su Linggong's squad to intercept He Yuan's retreating army. Although they weren't close acquaintances, a bit of friendship had blossomed between the two after fighting together for so long. Ji Miaotong was extremely impressed by Yang Kai's courage and strength, and she even praised him in private. Between the 3 of them was Su Linggong's squad's warship, which had some 5th Order and 6th Order masters operating it. Su Linggong's disciples, Qing Kuei and Suing Shui, were among them. The 3 7th Order masters maintained a triangle formation, protecting the warship while also borrowing its power to kill their enemies. Furthermore, if they got tired or exhausted their strength, they could even temporarily hide inside the warship to recover. The human race relied on this method in order to preserve their strength. The human race would not have been able to defend these great passes without these warships. This was also the reason why the humans was so concerned by the appearance of the Black Ink Clan's warship. If the Black Ink Clan even the battlefield, the human race really wouldn't know how to resist in the future. It had been half a day already since the battle broke out, and Yang Kai and the others had been fighting non-stop since it began. Yang Kai's condition was still good, but Su Linggong and Ji Miaotong both were clearly unable to continue. Although they had taken many spirit pills to keep their strength up, their high rate of consumption had made it difficult for them to replenish their small universe's world force. Regardless, the human armies should be withdrawing their forces soon, and at that time they could naturally return to the inner sanctum to rest and recover. After such a long, fierce battle, the Black Ink Clan soldiers had greatly decreased, and the resistance they faced was no longer as intense as before. The 8th Order Division commanders had basically been keeping a close watch on the territory lords, so as long as everyone was careful on the battlefield, there wouldn't be any major problems. At a certain point, Yang Kai thrust his spear, exploding a feudal lord charging at him into mist, and the thick black blood splashed all over his face. It wasn't that Yang Kai couldn't protect his face. It was just that he was too lazy to waste his strength to do so. In any case, Black Ink's strength had no effect on him. With the World Tree clone in his possession, he wouldn't be corrupted even if he was soaked in this black blood. As Yang Kai was pulling back his spear, something caught his eye and he looked in a certain direction. In his sight, the humans and the Black Ink clansmen were locked in a heated battle when suddenly, a nimble figure entered his sight, but it disappeared soon after. Yang Kai raised his brow slightly, wondering whether his eyes were playing tricks on him. Nonetheless, he found this figure a little familiar. Before he could give it another thought, another squad of Black Ink clansmen attacked from the side. Yang Kai quickly collected his thoughts and raised his spear to meet them, leaving a mountain of corpses in his wake. As expected, an order to withdraw came from Inyang Pass soon after. Following Su Linggong's command, the warship turned around and flew towards the inner sanctum. Although the Black Ink clan pursued them, it was difficult for them to penetrate the defenses of the 3 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters. Thus, they no longer dared to continue after chasing for a while. Not long after, squads flew back into the inner sanctum, leaving countless Black Ink clan corpses behind on the hellish battlefield. Get some rest, and be ready to fight at any moment. I'll go get the warship repaired, Su Linggong ordered before storing the huge warship in his small universe and heading towards the refining hall. Although the members of the squad weren't injured, their warship had suffered damage in many places and needed to be repaired by the artifact refiners of the refining hall.